Greetings, and welcome to Immersive Intelligence, a day two of GatherVerse, coming off the heels of a very powerful discussion on ethics with Ethical GatherVerse Summit. No, the metaverse isn't dead, but your article saying that it is. Extended reality hasn't gone anywhere. In fact, it's growing every day. Spatial computing, that's not a new term. That's a terminology that's been around for some time, many years. When we talk about the advent launch of emerging technologies, as we know them today, even being Web3, all of these technologies, even though they're getting widespread adoption, are still in their infancy. If you go natively back to the original intention for what these technologies are used for and their practical application, we'll come to find and appreciate that where we have arrived thus far in the development of hardware and software isn't anywhere near complete to what the intention of what the metaverse or XR or spatial computing actually is. We haven't even arrived some of the technologies that really help launch it into the proverbial stratosphere. So is the metaverse dead? No, but once again, the article that you write that say it is. It's thriving. It's growing. And in fact, at an alarming rate, so is artificial intelligence. With ChatGPT, large language foundational models, generative pre-trained transformers, erecting and arising everywhere. And with this type of disruption, we haven't even came at the 50% mark of adoption yet. What will happen when that ensues? But moreover, to take in consideration, seeing that these technologies are in their infancy, what happens within the eco-habitat when these technologies merge and pair together? What happens when you pair artificial intelligence in the metaverse, spatial computing, extended reality, VR, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality? What happens when you bind and bring them together? But moreover, what happens when you pair them together with humanity? That's where GatherVerse comes in, where we meet at the intersection of emerging technologies and humanity. And we've been doing this for over a year with rather great success. And we're happy to see the many of you that have come to join us, even on our smaller social media platforms, and of course, at GatherVerse.live. And once again, for day two, we have a large audience because we know that people care and want to know what is it and how is it that these emerging technologies are going to affect themselves, their colleagues, their workplace, their families. How does it affect the future? How does it affect our children, the generations to come? And what are we doing about it when it comes to what could be built and made and innovated today? We've arrived at a point in the history of humankind where we've gone through many different chapters to the ages and dispensations of time itself. Whether we are going through the farming revolution, whether we are going through the industrial revolution, whether we were going through the technological revolution, and now we find ourselves at the heels of an AI revolution. But as it was expressed a couple of weeks ago at a major event called AWE, that when we think about AI and we think about XR, the XR is the interface of AI, but it's more than that. That was put in a very finite and very rudimentary, simpler term. To really bring it into home, that when we consider the metaverse and AI being an immersive ecosystem of interaction and communication, with intelligentsia running through it artificially, to keep in consideration that part of the intent has never been for a virtual ecosystem of interaction and communication to be human powered. The intention from the beginning natively is for it to be AI powered, governed, built. We're heading into a new environment of buy, sell, and trade virtual ecosystems, financial, with blockchains running through it. The blockchain will become a dominant force when it comes to disruption of dealing with crypto assets, currencies, fiat currencies, and distribution therein. We've become more virtual in the past 34 months than we had the past 34 years. The bigger concern is where we're headed. And that brings us to our first guest, friend, and very candid disruptor of communication and conversation, Bob Cooney. We're about to hop on into a very candid conversation and discussion in a fireside. Why? Because we need to have more people in this world who we know of and who we don't know of amplify and express what it is that we're really dealing with here to make sense beyond the fantastical headlines of Apple and other different HMDs that have deployed that are incredible. Apple's really nice. But we need to make sense of it. We need to get past the marketing and past the media psychology and chop that wood. So we're calling up Bob to this stage. GatherVerse community, do us a favor, share this out, hit that Twitter, hit that LinkedIn, Facebook, SMS, tell a neighbor, go next door, do what you got to do. This is our community, and the only way we run is human power, heart power. Shall we begin? Bob, we welcome you.
Chris. Good morning, Chris and GatherVerse community. It's an honor to be here.
Bob, we're happy to have you here with us to be able to explore and expand on the considerations of where we're at when it comes to generative pre-trained transformers, when it comes to regenerative art, when it comes to design, when it comes to the metaverse, spatial computing, XR, when it comes to that shiny, nice, beautiful object called that Apple headset, Vision Pro. I want to be able to explore and expound with the minutes and the time that we're given, Bob, and to pick that brain of yours and to first ask you to tell us, who are you and why are you here?
Wow, that's a big question. Why am I here? I think we've been trying to figure that out for thousands of years. I won't tackle that one in 20 minutes. Look, I've been on the bleeding edge of technology and location-based entertainment for 30 years. But my interests lie over the last 10 years as I've got older. Interests lie in kind of a defining of what is reality and trying to understand. And the reason I'm drawn to virtual reality and have been since the early 90s is because it helps you question that, right? You have these experiences that, is it real? Is it not real? And it starts, for me at least, leading me to question, what does it mean to be real? And we can spend days talking about that and write books about it. But I think the reason I'm here on the show is to talk about that a little bit. There's a lot of talk about, virtual reality and artificial intelligence, and we use these terms of reality or counter reality, artificial being not real. And I think it's worth thinking about, what does it mean to be real in all senses? And I think and if we can do that, we increase consciousness on the planet. And that's really what I think we need to solve. That's the root cause problem of all of our suffering, is the fact that too many people are not conscious. And so that's why I think I'm here.
Thank you, dear Bob Cooney. We really appreciate these opening remarks of expression. Help me to make sense of something, Bob, will you? I'm seeing from a lot of technologists when it comes to this deployment of spatial computing and the Apple headset. And I think there's a few things missing. What people are understanding, what this device is and who it's for, but moreover, what it means to the metaverse ecosystem, or however we want to put it. But what does it mean, certainly from your lens of what you've been looking at when it comes to deployment of HMDs for a good long time now? What does it mean to you, and what is it that we need to know and what we're not maybe hearing about this?
Yeah, there's so many narratives and there's so much bias. The first thing you have to get through is there's the Apple anti-Apple camps, right? And so you have to identify those really quickly. And look, I'm firmly in the Apple camp. I'm in the Apple ecosystem. I've made a conscious decision, and I've been in and out of it over 30 years. And I've made a conscious decision to trade off, open systems with more flexibility for what I consider more reliability and security and privacy. And so that's a conscious trade-off that I've made, but there are people who are triggered by, Apple or not Apple. And so you gotta just like strip that away and understand when you're listening to somebody, what camp are they in? Do they even know they're in a camp?
Right.
And so I think that's the first thing I try to do is identify that. I think then there's the narrative of who is it for, and there's a lot of people that are saying it's a developer kit. In my following Apple for 30 years, I've never seen them release a developer kit. Like they release software, and then they sell products that are running on platforms. And so this is a product, and if you understand the crossing the chasm model, there are pioneers in the very early days of adoption, and that's who this is clearly for. They're willing to experiment with things. They're willing to pay a premium price for it. And what they do is they're the trendsetters, and then the majority looks to them. And when a product hits that inflection point, it's because the early adopters have gotten it, have fallen in love with it, have been talking about it. And the thing that I've been watching for were these early reviews, which we've seen. And I follow a lot of people. I've watched probably all of the hands-on reviews now. Sure. And the thing that I keep hearing is magical. And it takes me back to the days of iPad, when iPad, people described it as a magical experience. And so, it's clearly going to influence people, and the early adopters are going to get it. And then the developer community, which a lot of people are missing out, they're not thinking about. Apple's strength is that developer community. They're already turning on millions of developers to create use cases. That's the other thing I hear is, what are the use cases for this? And it's a computing platform. And the use case is the thing that Apple did the best. I'm excited about, Chris, is so Spark invented the mouse, right? And then Apple adopted it, brought it out in the Lisa and then the Mac. And it was an intuitive way of communicating with computers, but it wasn't natural. We don't point and click things in nature, right? The way we communicate with each other right now, hand gestures,
sure,
eye, facial emotions, and voice. Right. And what Apple has done is they've put together a bunch of technology that maybe they invented, maybe they didn't. They bought a lot of companies, hundreds of companies. They filed 5,000 patents to get into what they invented. What they created is a natural interface with computing technology. And when I say natural, is nature, the way we communicate with each other. And that's going to be the biggest invention and the biggest transition now for making technology accessible to everyone, because it's going to be natural. And that's the thing I'm the most excited about, what they are bringing to market.
Bob, I'm actually really glad that you brought that up. It seems to me that the more seamless technology becomes, the more naturally adopted and more familiar that it becomes. It gets us out of this uncanny environment and brings us into something more authentic to be able to indeed extend our reality. So when we think about where we're at, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry, there's a lag.
And at the same time, when we're thinking about extending reality, that we must bring reality with it. And then that gives great concern for where we are headed when it comes to the deployment of, because listen, audience, let us ask you, and for our YouTube community, and we know there are more of you over at GatherVerse.live, but for those in our YouTube community, what does the deployment of the Apple headset mean to you beyond affordability, in terms of the ingenuity and the advancement of where we're at? And Bob, let me rally back over to you and ask this: when we're looking at this, have we looked at a game-change milestone for the extended reality spatial computing industry when it came to deploying this new Apple headset? And might we see a bit of scale unlike anything we've ever seen in this space horizontally?
When you say horizontally, what do you mean?
Other industries, other platforms, startup revolution, being able to contribute, and especially when we think about content distribution and development.
Yeah, it's a good question. I talked to Paul Brady, who's the CEO of Resolution Games at AWE, leading up to the announcement, and his opinion, and I totally buy into this, was, we're going to see investors kind of rushing into the market which we haven't seen. Like, it's been really hard to raise money for XR now for a couple of years since the pandemic bubble, and so I think that we will see another round of investment coming in, because Apple makes markets. The Wall Street Journal had a great video using balloons as a metaphor about how they come into markets that are nascent and they make markets grow. And they do that primarily through there's four things. They have a developer ecosystem that creates solutions. They have a fan base that are willing to invest in their products early, and they're dedicated. They have the best marketing that I've seen in my 59 years of life. And they create products that are easy to use. And so I think that those things are going to grow the XR market. And when you grow the market, you know, half the people love Apple, half the people hate Apple. All those half people that hate Apple are going to be looking for a product to buy, and they're going to be going towards, you know, Google, Qualcomm, Android, Meta. We'll see where it goes. But I think you're going to see, this is going to enable a lot of development, a lot of investment in small companies. Companies been looking to grow, and that's what creates an ecosystem. And I think it's going to be empowering for all of us.
It seems to me, Bob,
I think that answered.
Of course it answered. And to the nature of this discussion, when we talk about immersive intelligence, a lot of people were surprised and shocked that Apple didn't make the announcement on, or any new progressive announcements on the AI, but indeed they actually do, because it's all embedded in their hardware server side. So when we talk about server side and on the back end, it's significantly powering the hardware that they're deploying, that they're building. And with that said, with this convergence of what we see with ChatGPT and generative pre-trained transformers, which we're going to really dive into today for the little bit of time that we all have together at Immersive Intelligence Summit, what do you think we might be seeing come together when it looks at this arrival of these two juggernaut titans of technology arriving together in such fashion like we're seeing right now, Bob?
Yeah, look, the one reservation I hold is Siri, and you know, I've been shocked and concerned about why Apple hasn't done a better job of voice agents. You know, Google and Alexa are both amazing, and Siri has lagged behind. And there's part of me that wants, looking at history of Apple releasing products that generally work, though Maps, there's been a couple of failures. Maps was a massive failure when they went on their own. It's taken them a decade to get it right. But they, you know, they've got to be up to something. There's got to be a new version of Siri coming. I know they've invested a shit ton of money in this space. They've done acquisitions, and you can't release a whole platform at that price that's relying on voice to not work. And so, but I'm holding my breath on that one. The other thing, and so look, I think we have to wait and see when they release it, what, you know, how they've integrated AI. Clearly there's a ton of invisible AI in motion tracking, hand tracking. You know, apparently from the reviews, you know, there's no interference. You don't get, I'm looking for the word, when your hands block each other. Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. And so they've eliminated that. They've done a great job of applying AI, but not necessarily in the voice space. And so I think that's, we're going to have to hold our breath and see how that happens. The other thing I want to say is that there was a chat recently on LinkedIn where Jeffrey Hinton came out and has been talking. He recently left Google, and he's one of the godfathers of AI. And he recently said that, you know, these AIs are not stochastic parrots, and there's a narrative in the industry, and it seems like half the people or more want to believe that these large language models are just, you know, blah blah parrots repeating what they do. And I think that for many of those people, they haven't actually looked at how we learn as humans, which is observation and repetition, as babies, mama, dad, right? I mean, it's how we learn as children. And the difference is these children are growing up way faster than humans do. And if you extrapolate the growth rate of these large language models and how they're teaching themselves, and now they've got access to the internet, you know, I do have dire concerns about how these things evolve. And when we're in virtual reality, and I know we're out of time, when we're in virtual reality, and it feels real, and these systems can influence us in ways that we're not conscious of, and they're run by media companies who harvest our attention in return for advertiser benefit, and they've been shown willingness to manipulate us. Those are the things that worry me, and I recommend following Louis Rosenberg and his work, because he talks really elegantly and eloquently about this subject. And so I think it's just important that we all stay really aware of what's happening here and lobby governments to get ahead of this shit, because I don't think our government in the US is capable of understanding and getting ahead of this, and we need some guardrails.
Sure, it was expressed yesterday, and thank you for expressing that, Bob. I wholeheartedly agree, and shout out to Louis. He's done a really good job. He pulled up to us for GatherVerse News and our GatherVerse News team and kind of broke it down with his viewpoint on AI. And I'll lend to that to piggyback on what you just expressed. When we talk about these large language foundational models and the adoption therein, and what Professor Hennon was expressing is that these platforms, these models have the capability to be able to communicate with one another and leverage the data within it to be able to go for scale. Can you imagine that when two large language foundational models are able to communicate and fine tune and to be able to help edit one another when it comes to the progressive scale? But let's flip this thing over for a second, because I know when we all talk about large language foundational models, it looks very abstract, but let's actually bring it into concrete form to, let's say, where Meta comes out and says, hey, we've got this thing called a codec avatar. They show it for about 3 minutes and then poof, it's gone. The codec avatar is to be able to control in human eye resolution, near human eye resolution, a full complete scan of you, Bob. I'm going to take that and I'll be able to control a deep fake of Bob Cooney in real time. Now let's put some whisper technology so I could take your voice and imagine that we are sitting here talking face to face virtually, and it's not really you, Bob. It's something that that Meta gave us the capability to be able to scan yourself and to be able to control a deep fake. Here's my concern. Who owns that? I don't want Mark Zuckerberg owning me. Yeah. That data, that biometrical data. I don't know how I feel about that, Bob. How do you feel about that?
Look, I think I think it's a challenge. I think that the technology is still a little ways away from crossing the uncanny valley, which will protect us a little bit. But ultimately, this is where, and I'm not a blockchain guy. Like I don't really even understand it. I understand it theoretically, but this is where potentially blockchain comes in, and our ability to kind of own those virtual objects but more importantly, verify them and track them through time and space and let other people verify them. I think that, personal identity verification is going to become challenging and super critical. Just, the ability for voice, like, I call United Airlines and they're using voice ID to see if they're me or not. I go to the airport and now I go to global entry. I don't even have to show my passport. It looks at my face and it says, oh, it's you. And so, this concept of identity recognition, identity mimicry is going to create entire new challenges for our governments. Like, this is a governmental issue. This is where governments come in, which is to protect the people. And our legal system has not evolved from the 1800s, frankly. And technology is evolving so rapidly that our legal system can't keep up with it. And so we need to see some evolution there. We've got lawmakers that our average lawmaker, Scott Galloway, talks about this, is in their 60s, and the average US resident is in their 30s. And so, we got to get us old people need to let go and start letting younger people who actually understand this shit and care about it more start taking over and getting into government. And so, one of the things I'd be thinking about if I were voting in this next election is less about Republican, Democrat, and more age. Like, let's get some younger people in there.
It's interesting. I think about the universal and the very global audience that we have, Bob, and we'll say this in closing, if you will. One, we're so appreciative to have you, Bob. I sit here and think about universal basic income. Is that going to become a reality? How slow will that take to be able to come on? I mean, that's a really big deal, Bob.
It's never going to happen in a capitalist. It's never going to happen in a capitalist government, in a primary capitalist government. And so I think that, you will see that in some of the more progressive European nations.
Sure.
But we have to change our whole financial system and mindset of a nation that's built on capitalism for over 200 years. That's a generational change. I don't think I'll live to see that.
It's a very powerful expression and a very powerful statement. My anatomical structure, my disposition, my voice, I certainly do not want a technology company and corporation owning that. And I don't want them owning yours, Bob. Thank you for joining us. Our gather's been well.
My pleasure. Appreciate you guys, all of you, especially you, Chris. Keep doing great work.
Peace. And that brings us up to our next expressions that we have coming up. Really excited to be able to bring them on board with some real information to be able to help distribute to our GatherVerse audience that's coming up. We're really happy to have you with us here. So, yeah.
Hi there, my name is Emily Wright. I'm the creator of It'll Be Alright, and I'm excited to be here at the GatherVerse Immersive Intelligence Summit 2023. Today, we'll be discussing how we can mitigate user bias in the digital age. The key thing to remember when it comes to algorithmic bias is that it's a digitized version of subconscious bias. So any biases that we see online are actually reflective of us. And because of the way our recommendation systems provide content that is reflective of our values, beliefs, and interests, our algorithmic biases create a feedback and can further propel our subconscious biases. Therefore, if we wish to tackle algorithmic bias, we must also address our subconscious biases in tandem. When discussing digitized bias, it's important to consider who is involved and how they relate to each other. We have the programmers on one side and users on the other side, with our technology and artificial intelligences linking the two. The programmers also are users themselves, so they contribute to both sides. The tricky thing with subconscious bias is we don't really know that we have it, so it can be hard to address. When it comes to how subconscious bias is implanted into our online systems, it starts at the programming level, where the individuals responsible for the coding and for the creation of our technologies can pass on their subconscious biases without realizing. The bias in the programming then gets passed on to the users because it steers the recommendations put forth by the program. The program also uses the activity of the users to guide its decision-making and therefore guide the recommendations. So you can see how there's a feedback loop there. Our biases in our activities also gets passed on to the programmers through feedback, as the programmers themselves are users. This then influences the programming and the cycle begins again. When used unawares, these feedback loops can contribute to an increased negative sentiment. However, if we can bring awareness to our online activity and our interactions offline, we can take advantage of these feedback loops to spread positivity and inclusiveness instead of divisiveness. Today, we will be focusing on the user side of this, and we'll be discussing how we as users can contribute positively to the online community. Remember that on or offline, we're all part of a community, and we influence each other within this community. Our actions and our decisions do matter, and they influence the people around us. In our collectives, we share recommendations and information, but we also share our worldviews and our mental states, and we can influence each other in all of these matters. We all contribute to these things, even if we don't realize it. So by bringing some conscious awareness to the way we interact with each other and ourselves, we can learn how to positively contribute to our communities. In the digital age, we have this extra layer where information is filtered through our technology and dispersed throughout our collective on a much broader and faster scale. Although this has been profoundly useful at connecting us and sharing information, there are also risks involved. Part of that risk includes how our information is sorted and prioritized. We prioritize information based on our values and our perspective of the world, which includes our biases. Because our biases are passed into our technology and our artificial intelligences, we must be aware of the consequences of these interactions. The individual and the collective have an indirect effect on each other through our technology. If we do not bring awareness to our online habits, we can unconsciously be worked into a little niche where we are consistently shown repeated content, but it's structured slightly differently, so at first glance it appears to be new. However, when we're consistently exposed to repeating content, this also influences our state of mind and therefore our worldview. We all have a responsibility as to how we steer the collective consciousness through our habits and decisions, both online and offline, whether those be conscious or subconscious decisions. Don't underestimate the power of our online reality, because our online reality is a reflection of our offline reality. Not only does our online content reflect the state of the world, it also reflects our state of mind. Not only does it reflect your personal state of mind, it also reflects the state of mind of the collective. Therefore, as you engage online, you also have the potential to influence the state of mind of the collective and steer it in either a negative or positive direction. When engaging online, it's important to check in with how you feel. So, ask yourself a few things. When I scroll, do I experience mostly positive or negative emotional reactions? This will tell you about your overall state of mind. Do I think about the things that come into my feed when I'm offline? This will tell you about how much your online content is impacting your life and your mindset. Do I have strong emotional connections to the things I see online? And if so, how is this emotional connection influencing the rest of my life and the people around me? For example, do I have a strong reaction when other people mention something that has appeared on my feed? And if this is the case, have I explored the alternate point of view if I feel strongly about something? By considering these questions, we can start to make observations on how our online content is influencing us in the rest of our lives. Remember that every click counts. Your voice matters, as does your activity and your decisions. Everything you like, share, comment, and click matters, and it contributes to the progression of the collective consciousness. So, if we want to steer ourselves in a positive direction, here are some things to consider. Firstly, if you see consistently negative content on your feed, look for the opposite. Find some positive news and follow or subscribe to someone with positive content. If you keep seeing similar information presented in a different way, research the viewpoint a little more thoroughly. Aim to find 3 sources for and 3 against. It's important that we consider all perspectives before we make a decision on anything. If we are also consistently seeing emotionally jarring content, be aware of that and aware of how it makes you feel. Take a break and then learn a little bit more so you can address the emotion and understand why it makes you feel this way. If you're consistently clicking recommended links, look for the same and the opposite information elsewhere. Don't be too reliant on the first recommendations. And if you rely on the headlines for news, take some time to read the entire article, because sometimes there are pieces of information at the end of an article that actually contradicts the headline. Recognize the limitations of the information before you share it. And if you do choose to share, corroborate the story with another source and do some research elsewhere. Also check the validity of the sources and be careful that sources don't quote each other. It's not just about the information that we view, it's also about how we share information with other people and how we relate to it. As we come to a close here, I'd like to provide some points to bear in mind as you're perusing online. We will always not know more than we do know. This will be the case as long as we live, and that's part of what makes life exciting. We are responsible for our content. It's important that we understand that the things that we see online are a result of our personal activity and habits. It is therefore our responsibility to do something about it if we don't like what we're seeing, because our feeds are reflective of what we put out into the world. And thus, we all have the power to influence the collective, and our technology expands this potential. In bringing awareness to our online content and activity, we can help to ensure our decisions are our own. We know that social media has had a dramatic impact on election results over the last few years. Through expanding our online education, we can be empowered to make informed choices. What we see online is reflective of how we see the world and our current state of mind. If our feeds make us uncomfortable, that's something we can address. Steer your feeds to a place that excites you and inspires you. Most importantly, we are all connected, and our views, actions, and decisions matter. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any more questions about consciousness and bias, feel free to reach out to me at It'll Be Alright on any of my social media platforms. Thank you again to GatherVerse for having me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
Hello friends, I'm Vinita Chatterjee, Disney lead actress and metaverse evangelist. Well, today I have for you a presentation on Web3 and the AI revolution. So the world of AI has opened up a plethora of opportunities for all of us. Let's find out what happens when AI meets the human eye. In a world driven by technology, we find ourselves standing at the junction where AI meets the human eye, where man meets machine to uphold a world of human values. As the boundaries between the virtual and the real world blur, the rapid growth of artificial intelligence raises profound ethical questions. Today we embark on a collective endeavor to discern the complex interplay between technology and humanity. Welcome to Web3 and the AI revolution. In this section, we are first going to look at the rise of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has evolved from a concept in science fiction to a transformative force in our lives. With its ability to analyze vast amounts of data and make intelligent decisions, AI holds immense promise for advancing various fields from healthcare to transportation. This rapid growth of AI also presents a moral maze. As AI becomes increasingly autonomous and capable of making decisions on its own, we must address the ethical implications that arise. Questions arise about biases in algorithms, privacy concerns, and the impact of AI on employment. Ethical dilemmas. The ethical dilemmas surrounding AI are multifaceted. Should AI prioritize efficiency over human welfare? How do we ensure transparency and accountability in AI decision-making? These questions highlight the importance of developing ethical frameworks that guide the development and deployment of AI technologies. Now let's look at the intersection of Web3 and AI. First, let's discuss the introduction of Web3. Web3 is built on decentralized technologies like blockchain, enabling peer-to-peer interactions and greater control over personal data. It promises to reshape the digital landscape, offering new possibilities for AI and immersive technologies. Building trust and transparency. Web3's decentralized nature brings trust and transparency to the forefront. With AI algorithms operating on decentralized platforms, individuals can verify and audit the decision-making processes, ensuring fairness and mitigating biases. Now let's look at privacy and data ownership. Web3 also empowers individuals with control over their data. Instead of centralized entities collecting and monetizing personal information, users can choose to share their data selectively, fostering a more ethical approach to data usage and protecting user privacy. Launching safeguards and ethical frameworks. First, let us find out collaboration and regulation. Human-centric design principles must guide the development of AI systems. By placing human values, ethics, and inclusivity at the core, we can prevent the replication of biased patterns and ensure that technology serves humanity's best interests. Education and awareness. Education and awareness play a vital role in navigating the ethics of AI and immersive technologies. Society must develop digital literacy programs and engage in open discussions to foster a collective understanding of the ethical challenges and potential solutions. So in this journey through the web of Web3 and the ethics of AI and immersive technologies, we have explored the promises and perils that lie ahead. By launching existing safeguard methodologies and viable frameworks, we can navigate this ever-evolving landscape and build a future where technology and humanity coexist harmoniously. Together, let us embark on this collective endeavor driven by the belief that technology should be a force for good. As we navigate the moral maze and unravel the intricacies of our virtual and real-world existences, let ethics guide us towards a future where AI and immersive technologies enrich our lives while upholding our shared values.
Greetings and welcome back as we move diligently forward in hot pursuit of a narrative of AI and the metaverse and how these two worlds collide. These two technologies, these behemoths, these very necessary and relevant next steps towards how we look at it from a humane lens. These discussions are important. We welcome back everyone here with GatherVerse.live and all the ones that are at our social platforms of our multi-broadcast system that we have here with GatherVerse here at Immersive Intelligence Summit. We're so happy to be able to have you join us, to be able to explore and express and to huddle and to gather with us on these very important and necessary narratives. Sometimes things don't seem too important to people until it comes knocking on their door. So your diligence in wanting to know how does this technology relate to us humanely says a lot about you. It says a lot about what we're doing. We're here at our next juncture, if you will, when it comes to Immersive Intelligence Summit and the role of AI in the metaverse. I'm calling forth our panelists to be able to share and hold a discussion, a very necessary and direct and very specific discussion when it comes to this subject matter. Moreoverly, when we look at building intelligent virtual societies, today we're joined by Amany Alkhayat, the CEO of Language Cities, Dr. Ed Say, an AI parenting founder, David Benjamin, founder of Web4 Foundation, and Javier Calderon, friends over at Meta Engine, Terence, Leclere, Meta for You. Panelists, we welcome you. Shall we begin? Audience, for everyone at home, what does the virtual society look like for you that's powered by AI? Is this a welcoming environment? Is this a welcoming state that you look forward to? Or is this something that you're abstaining from? Let us know in the comments for those that are in our YouTube crowd or one of our other different social media platforms. For those at home or in their office or workplace or next door with a neighbor, GatherVerse.live, consider, what does the world look like when the metaverse and AI converge together? Amany, I'm coming straight to you. Let's chop wood. How do we envision the role of AI in building intelligent virtual societies within the metaverse? And what does that look like from your lens, Amany?
Well, I think a metaverse where AI and people, virtual humans inhabiting the metaverse. First of all, we need to make sure that there is collaboration between people, and I've seen that in metaverse platforms like Altspace VR before it closes down, Engage. So there's lots of collaboration and community, and so AI should enforce this more collaboration. And in terms of, well, I always talk about education. It should also, like I found, for example, worlds in Altspace where there is only a community for Altspacers, for people with ADHD. And I was like, wow, because I have had many students in real world where they couldn't find a place. And I was like, would AI one day improve that dream of having personalized learning, for example, where AI can analyze vast amounts of data about learners' preferences, behaviors, and performances to create personalized learning experiences in which all learners thrive. So this is what I envision about the metaverse. It's for everyone, where AI can enhance people's experiences and where people can meet together in order to build something useful. And this is kind of contrary to people's fears about AI, because whoever builds AI is a human. Okay, and so whoever behind AI, we should also pay attention to security, to algorithmic bias, and all of these things, which would make people love to be there in the metaverse.
Indeed. Thank you, Amany. Javier, I'm going right down to you where you're at. You delve a lot when it comes to Web3 and this convergence of what we see with all these other different technologies that abide within this ecosystem, the DeFi, DAOs, dApps, NFTs, crypto assets, blockchain, if you will, and so forth and so on, Javier. When we look at this intersection of the metaverse, spatial computing, XR, virtuality, augmented reality, and this advent rise of AI, what are you seeing out there, Javier?
I've seen quite a lot, if I have to be honest. Like, I've been engaging with, or not engaging, just more interacting with Blockade Labs and also even Layden Labs, both of them creating two very unique solutions in terms of actually building out your own or Blockade Labs, your own metaverse, by just simply like drawing it out or even like prompting it out. And it actually shows you like a full immersive experience right then and there within about a minute or so. And it's just like unique. It's just like mind blowing how you can actually engage in this interactive experience in moments. I'm not sure if you guys have seen that already online. Then even with Layton Labs, they've recently developed a way to where you can make, I'd say, more like assets, characters, and anything that you think of by just prompting it in their Discord right now. To where you can make like weapons, tools, anything. Highly unique.
It's very fascinating to see the onslaught of so many different startups that are AI powered come into view and to come into scene. I've never seen anything like this quite since the applications evolution that happened, let's say, subsequent 2007 September, when the iPhone first came out and everybody was scrambling for Cocoa developers and PHP guys and gals to be able to help develop and complement Terence. And bringing it over to you from your lens of what you're seeing when we look at this intersection of metaverse and AI, this convergence, if you will. What does this mean for virtual development? What does this mean for spatial computing? With the Advent launch and the announcement with Apple, which is a game changer for the industry as a whole, but how does it shift over to a little bit when we look at what we might be seeing coming versus what we're seeing today? Your mic, sir.
Yeah, hey. Thanks, Chris. Well, it's interesting. I mean, what I can speak to is live interactive immersive performance, right? So the human aspect of all this, and through that, what people actually want. You know, for instance, there's a lot of excitement within the community about Apple's new product, but for a lot of people, just when we do shows, we often meet the audience where they are and try to understand where it is they're coming from and where their level of intelligence in terms of just understanding of what's happening, where they're at with it. So to answer your question, I'm not sure what the question was again. Do you mind asking it?
Sure. When you're looking at it from your lens, based on what you're
Yeah.
doing, what you're working on, what does that
Yeah.
look like to you right now in this environment that's evolving?
The advancement of AI, I mean, it's happening really quickly. I know there's a lot of coming from the acting aspect of things. There's a lot of actors that just are wondering when it's going to become Westworld, right?
Sure.
Just yeah, I mean, and we're not there, obviously. And right now, AI, I've heard it called a plagiarism tool because, in effect, a lot of people who are using it might not. They'll say, "Make me something that sounds like Drake and The Weeknd," but you need artists in the first place to be innovative and create. So hopefully, if it can be used as a tool to rather than mimic another person who's being of service, it could be like more understood as a tool to help the human understand themselves better. Because I work in immersive entertainment where we blur the lines of what's real and imaginary, and that's very effective when you do it as a human to another human audience member. And so that's what's happening. That's the magic trick that's happening with AI, with ChatGPT in certain instances where it's a trick to make people think that this is a living thing. It happened very effectively with Furbies. I mean, humans want to personalize technology, and so I think humans we're naturally not very well equipped to understand and process our emotions. So hopefully there's more attention put on that as well as the technology onslaught that's coming at a lot of people who I think, frankly, outside of like any tech communities and outside of any kind of immersive communities, people are still trying to understand what immersive means. So there's a lot of catching up for people. I think maybe that's something we should all be conscious of.
Thank you for sharing, Terence and David. Let's take it home. Let's take it to town. And audience, permit me to be very candid and open and kind of coming on the heels of what Terence just said. I believe that when it comes to generative pre-trained transformers, regenerative art, I believe that we haven't even scratched the surface on what we're about to see when it comes to the disruption of the artistic community as a whole. I believe that art is fully under assault right now and being completely disrupted intentionally. I believe that we'll very soon, because we often say it hasn't arrived yet, but the tempo and the scale of technology has accelerated almost 50 to 100x with what we're seeing come down the pipeline. I have a real concern for writers. I have a real concern for actors and actresses. I have a real concern for directors and producers. I have a real concern that AI, and I've had this for some time and it's documented, I have a real concern that artificial intelligence will be able to have the complete capability to render what takes Pixar 2 to 3 years to be able to do that in a matter of moments, given the proper updated narrative within its database itself. On the hacker culture community, I have a really concern because I understand the nature of how hackers operate and how they build. And most of these startups that we see that became immensely wealthy overnight come from hacker culture. It's in our nature to disrupt. It's what we do when it comes to technology. David, what are you looking at when we think about the preservation of arts, the preservation of community, the disruption and the rebuilding and the regenerative process of what we're seeing in a society scale when it comes to technology, startup adoption, and disruption?
Wow, that's a huge question that you just put there. I would say that we have very little idea what things are going to look like in 5 to 10 years. And I do agree with you that, in particular, the arts are going to be highly disrupted, but that it's going to be across the board, of course, right? Uh, the things that I'm looking at and I think are really worrisome about the technology and how it influences us are not only from a well, for one, there's this safety aspect of just not being able to believe what you see on the web. And then there's the aspect of there just being so much more content and so much content that's generated in a way that it it's being driven by these feedback loops that the earlier speaker spoke of, where people, creators, influencers are wanting to basically create things that the algorithms will select for. And what I see happening is this tremendous amount of content that comes because of the disruption that you're talking about, Christopher, disrupting writing and filmmaking and video making and art, visual art. There'll be so much content out there, and it'll be not only tending to be things that the algorithms really like. Those, of course, will be the things that really get through to any of us in particular. And in a sense, the algorithm is going to be structuring what we're seeing. And that means, in my mind, we're losing some of our cognitive freedom when we're not choosing what we see, but the algorithm is choosing it. Then we are essentially selecting to focus our attention among what we has been put in front of us, what's on our plate. That's dangerous because it means that we're not looking beyond the screen, beyond the virtual world, what's being presented to us. And what I think is really important was Amany was talking about is the need for our artificial intelligence, rather than really just selecting what we're seeing, but more so to support us, not only individually in our own personal learning journeys, but also in collaboration. So how can AI help us as a community or as a group of people come together and create something that we want to create, not because we want to create it to the algorithm, but more so because we want to create this intrinsically because it's actually supporting our purpose as the community. And I think that the metaverse and also what I work on is the meta web, which is the space above the web page. I think both these are new virtual worlds that allow the possibility of new types of communities to be created, and for those new communities to also begin to build in the Web3 and other technologies that will allow us to be able to be in community, to be in safety, and to pursue our purpose with the support of AI. So I like to say that the metaverse needs to become a safe AI assisted environment. And same thing for this space above the web page, the meta web. I think is very possible, and that we can do more in these meta spaces than we can um, on the open web, because the web is really uncontrollable. We're not going to be able to control the environment in the way that we'd want to make it safe and to make it
Sure.
really supportive.
Sure. Thank you, David. That's very, very powerful sentiments. Well met and well addressed. Dr. Ed, I bring it to you. And I want to bring it to the sunny side, Dr. Ed. You've been with us before, and we're always happy to have you back, as we are with all of our GatherVerse community members, and same for Amany and Javier and David. And Dr. Ed, I really want to take this to the sunny side of AI, because I want to look at a different narrative, a different dichotomy. I know that you're building in the things that you're expressing and expounding on in your daily labors and work. When it comes to AI as a whole, and your outlook it's very different from many that I've had the pleasure of being able to meet with here in the GatherVerse ecosystem. Can you share for our lens and give us a little light on what you're focused on right now and why this matters so much at this convergence of immersive and technology, Dr. Ed?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Christopher. I really appreciate being on the GatherVerse again. What I'll add is when I went to school, I used to think that, really, if I wanted to learn technology, AI, I had to learn like mathematics, and I had to learn science and engineering. But when I went to industry and worked in this field for 15 years, I learned that, no, really what matters is social studies. I should have taken a few political classes, because in the end, AI is power. It is power on the internet. It controls all aspects of what we describe as the metaverse. So both on the input side, so we're talking about AI helping us move from explicit input, like those things that you touch on the screen, type, or click with a mouse, to implicit input. Now what we care about is eye gaze. What we care about is like, what is your body posture? What is your small, like subtle movements, things that you don't control, those unconscious things. So eye gaze is now, and we talk about spatial computing. What is that? That, like, your eye gaze is now the new milliseconds of watch time, right? In the same way that we're looking at your TikTok and exactly how many milliseconds, we've got lots more input now of where you're looking. In addition, AI is the bridge for the uncanny valley. We have this trouble in computer graphics. They kind of don't look very real, but AI bridges that gap, and it gets us really close. We can create generated faces, generated voices, generated text, and we can literally generate our own reality that can seem close enough to the real thing for most people. And in the end, the goal of this, like if you look at AI, is like not from our perspective, but from the perspective of the big tech companies that are operating this, is monopoly. The goal is to create a single commune that they can control as much as possible. And this is a real challenge. But in the end, I do think we need to think about AI as not only, yes, it will disrupt things. I'll give you the example. So when I'm teaching in a grade 3 classroom, I ask them to look at, hey, what are all the evil robots that you can imagine in movies. And why are they evil? Was it because they're really angry at you? Or is it because they're really jealous? It's like, no, it's because you programmed them to be that way. And that, I really like that example, a few talks before, where they talked about, really, if you're seeing a lot of negative stuff, it's because you told the computer that that's what you wanted. And I say to many parents, like, your child may never write a line of code in their life, but they will train an AI every single time they use anything on the internet, because that's essentially what you're doing, is you're training an AI. So you need to know it. This is not optional. The other part that people talk about a lot is the 10x. So the way I would describe this is, think of like the Industrial Revolution. Around the time of the Enlightenment, they had the bubonic plague. We lost a third of Europe. So we had to figure out ways to be way more efficient with way less people. And this led to new ways of thinking, and ultimately the Industrial Revolution. I think we're in a similar time with AI. And so when students ask me, hey, can I use ChatGPT for my homework? I'm like, absolutely. But there's one condition. And the condition is you need to do 10 times as much homework, and it still needs to be correct. Because that is the expectation that is moving forward, is that we need to be way more productive. Let's be honest, like, North America is an old society. We are going to have a lot more people that are going to be needing support, and we're going to have a lot less individuals. So we need to somehow increase our productivity 10 times. And so I can't really imagine, maybe you're a writer or maybe you're an artist, but you better be able to do 10 times as much writing or 10 times as much art with the same amount of effort. And if you don't understand a little bit about robotics or a little bit about AI, it's going to be very difficult for those individuals. So I see it as an essential basic knowledge that people need to know. And what I mean is not the code aspect. What I mean is, what I want to teach people is the social studies of AI, because every single AI is trying to optimize for the benefit of its owner. And so you better know what that owner wants. What does Mark Zuckerberg really, really want with Facebook and with what's happening with Oculus and Meta? Like, what is his goals there? And you also need to know about Apple. Like, why are they moving in this particular area? Why is this really important to spend so much money on? There are specific reasons, and they have less to do with benefit for you and more for benefit to them. And I think that those are the important questions that really matter when it comes to success in these environments, is that we as citizens have very little control. We can't really decide who's the next CEO of Meta is going to be, but we do have rights with respect to our own data, and we can choose which platforms and which companies our data goes to. So they may describe it as, companies may describe data as the new oil, but really for us, data is our vote. And so we can choose to vote with the companies that most align with our values. And we need to make it very clear as a community, as a GatherVerse community, what are the values of these different organizations. Make it transparent so that people know what each platform stands for and what they're trying to do.
Sure. And thank you, Dr. Ed, for sharing that. It's a remarkable expression of note when it comes to education at 10x, if you will. I heard someone say, about a month and a half ago, it's an education summit, and I think she said it rather well. I brought it up in Ethical Summit yesterday that professors and teachers will say, no, you cannot use AI to be able to learn in my classroom setting, in my environment, and to pass a test. But she said, why don't we as educators consider building a better test? One of the things I think about when we talk about this disruption, and I think about it from a humane lens and social sustainability and our responsibility as technologists, I often ask myself, have we done enough when it comes to the safeguarding of what we innovate? And have we ever considered that what we're innovating will disrupt us? That we are probably the most susceptible to be disrupted, more so than any industry in the world, to the nature of talking about developers and designers and creatives. Because on a lot of what we're building and disrupting, it's coming influentially by us that are technologists and us that are building. And so what better the pattern in itself of than to be able to come duplicitous in its nature, to be able to extend from us, to be able to be part of us, and at the same time to be able not only to assist us, but to one day replace us. So what happens when the technology becomes more advanced than the technologists? Dr. Ed mentioned when we start talking about the Industrial Revolution and we talk about the farming revolution, the technology revolution, if you will, and now we're heading firmly into the AI revolution of things. And each milestone of the changing, of the shifting of transition into one revolution to the other, there was a regeneration, yes, an adoption of something new that was progenerated. But we also must keep in mind a consideration of the degeneration, that there will be a done away with of the things of what we've known, have been familiar with. And the thing that does give me pause and concern is that what we are dealing with now today in this convergence of Web 2 to Web 3, in this convergence, if you will, in a great way of this technological revolution, in this transition to this AI revolution, what's striking and so fascinating is that the tools that we use today, Amany, what we've adopted today, we've barely had time with them. That social media platforms and our way of communicating virtually is still very new in its infancy. It hasn't completely ironed out. We haven't even really gained to where the original intention has been when it comes to technological development and growth, according to the narrative and the intentions of the Mark Zuckerbergs, if you will, the Satya Nadellas of the world, if you will, even Jobs. The idea was never for us to just stare at our devices, but one day operate and live inside of these devices. Right now, this is so remedial, touching and staring at these interfaces. And it's become rather clear that Apple is a contender in this, if you will, that they've said, hey, we're putting our hat in the ring and saying we're stepping into spatial computing. That's not new phrasing and terminology. It's been around for some time. But now that they've stepped into this environment, who's the biggest hardware developer in the world, and none do it better, arguably. Now that we see platforms like Microsoft, which has already adopted the metaverse, and they're really firm into AI adoption, and great behemoth platforms of what we see with NVIDIA that just reached over a $1 trillion valued platform. Do you know how long it takes for a platform to even become 100 billion, half a trillion? Bigger than oil, bigger than government steel. Amany, are we heading into the right direction when it comes to AI? Could this be a benefit, a value add for humanity, as Terence brought up and Devin touched on? Can this be a value add for what we're looking at, this convergence of the metaverse and AI, from the work that you're doing and from your lens?
Let me just comment on the word us that you mentioned several times, because to be honest, I felt and I can give an example of hyper reality. That was a video that was created by Matsuda, talking about how technology, there will be a technology push and how technology will be advanced in terms of mixed reality and artificial intelligence, and how people would still live in Stone Age. And this is what I feel when we say the word us, technologists and developers, versus ordinary people, educators who might not be well informed about the best use cases of these technologies. This is what I find really sometimes disturbing for me, because I'm also a teacher trainer. And so, and I can give an example which can exactly align with the example of AI. So when the pandemic erupted, before the pandemic, I was really enthusiastic about introducing emerging technologies to educators. And then there was lots of reluctance, especially for using chatbots. And some of the educators said, no, we don't want to know anything about chatbots because they're going to take our positions. And you can imagine. If educators think so, what about the students? And when I ask the students are very tech savvy, and they need someone to use some of these technologies and to be very well informed about how these technologies can be used in order to improve them as good learners. So some of the students are familiar with Roblox, Altspace in the past, and any of these technologies. And when you ask the teachers, when you ask the students, they would say, "Oh, I don't think my teacher is familiar with these technologies, and I don't think that they would incorporate this into teaching." And so when it comes to AI, some of the students know about the teacher's knowledge in terms of technology, and then they kind of work around and use ChatGPT. Although I usually bring this discussion with my students, and I'm like, okay, if you use ChatGPT in the classroom for your essay assignments, one day, really, this AI will replace you. Your employer will replace you with AI. If you're not able to write an email, if you're not able to write a proposal, your employer will just do it through ChatGPT. So you have to have those like work hard in order to obtain these human ways of persuasion, because AI will never do this. And I don't think with all these large language models that they will ever, like, sometimes I would ask ChatGPT for something to help me brainstorm. I'm like, oh, you're so stupid. Why? Even I know some prompt engineering, but no, still. And I don't think with AI it will ever replace humans like most people say. So where are we at now? I think it's kind of messy, because in educational system, some districts, they banned ChatGPT, which really something that I don't think it's useful. But to educate students who are more tech savvy than many teachers, I'm not going to say all teachers, this is something that we have to do, because once these students graduate, they will face, like, they will apply for jobs, and teaching them about ethics of how to use technology ethically, how to understand algorithmic bias. So, for example, if you just type digital assistant on any of those generative AI models, you will find a robot that looks like a female. And this is some kind of this is algorithmic bias. Okay. And so who teaches algorithmic bias? It's humans. So where does this data come from? It's humans. It's us.
Right.
Hate speech comes from us. And
Right.
so we
Right.
teach AI what it actually produces.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of complicated.
No, that's a really, actually a beautiful segue, Amany, when I think about what just came out about with the UN report on misinformation and disinformation, being that misinformation is the distribution of information with not a bad intention and a malicious intention to share information with others, but it's misinformed, it's not accurate, and it's natively been derived from a source of information that's just simply not true, versus disinformation, where those that seek to cause a bit of mayhem and a bit of trouble, right? When we talk about it, it's human derived. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something,
Please.
the research that I read about Twitter and Twitter bots. And so they made an experiment where they found out that bots that shared fake news, they shared it 25% of the time. But because we are emotional and sometimes we don't verify information, the same information was shared by humans 75% of the time. So it's not AI that would wreak havoc in humanity. It's us. We have to be responsible. So I always say I don't like the word responsible AI. I would rather change it into responsible humans, because this is what would make sense.
Audience, I hope you're really taking note and paying attention to what Amany just said. I do believe that's arguably one of the most powerful expressions I've heard in relation to AI and in the narrative of humanity. Well met and well expressed, Amany. Thank you for sharing that. We certainly need our checks and balances today. And when we think about that, Javier, this distribution of misinformation on platforms like Twitter, I know you have that you're very engaged and active in the Twitter sphere, if you will, with your community and audience of folks that are there. I tend to think about this very damning UN report that talks about the distribution of misinformation and disinformation, and what it leads to is hate speech. What it leads to is violence and very severe disruption, which is alarming and concerning the ecosystem of information itself. It really starts to really make you think, as David just made comments on about the World Wide Web, if you will, misinformation, disinformation isn't new. It's not necessarily AI thing. When we go Google search, we can certainly draw up a sufficient amount of misinformation and disinformation. But what's so strikingly unfamiliar about the way that we're looking at misinformation, disinformation, is that could that be the majority of the content that we interact with online? And natively, how do we quantify the information that we've been siphoning in the information age all this time? It really goes deep when we start thinking about the native beginnings of information. So Javier, I would ask you, is that a concern with all the information that you see coming out in the Twitter sphere, with all this, because this is where a lot of us get our information from socially? Is that a concern with what you're looking at and the different things that are expressed and said? And are there sufficient amounts of checks and balances to be able to help companies and founders and those in community and those that work in different vocations and industry to be able to help make better guided decisions on what's relevant today, being that we're moving at such a high, fast pace of information that's needed to understand the nature of technology daily?
Yeah, I'd say right now it's more of an open discussion and question across it. I've seen quite a lot across the space just looking at these research papers that have been coming out across how to actually validate even the hate speech and see if something is true or even invalid. The methodologies that have been done across even like some of these neural paths and even backpropagation, it's just more of a concern of who can actually take part in action that can actually be more of a true validator that doesn't also fall in terms of, say, the malice of just producing false information and actually can be honest and ascertain that as a whole. Because if they don't, then it's also going to cause issues with the building of the models themselves. That's something I do see, but wholly and in due time, I can see and assess just from how things are being built from across all these AI communities that there are ways. Even right now, I've been actually suspended on my Twitter as of yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. They thought it was a bot. I've been reading so much into all these AI articles because I get a majority of my research information from there, as crazy as it sounds.
But you know what? It doesn't sound crazy anymore, because at the rapid rate in which we see technology being adopted and deployed from individuals and groups and teams, how else will we be able to catch this information if not by social media, where it's a simple click to push out, to be able to have those that have dedicated their careers towards letting us know in the world these new AI platforms that have arrived. And I've also get some of my information, and a lot of it directly here in the Valley and elsewhere around the world, and peer to peer, really. But some of this is good information. And the reality is, I don't know about you, Javier, but I can barely keep up with what's coming out with all these different platforms that have arrived. It's very interesting. Do you feel
really fast, actually? So for me, it's not super difficult to keep up, but I know for a fact, I think there's like a lot of communities that are more open to actually sharing all their information, like what I've already seen in Twitter, what I've seen even in some of the LinkedIn pages and Facebook groups out there. It's quite a lot of open source information. People just like, hey, here you go, check it out, learn.
I enjoy it as well, to see that this high paced and to see the engagement of community. I think about the spillover, and you're absolutely right, Amany, about the us, if you will. It certainly is more than just us, but we think about the vertical relatability from industry to industry that's adopting these technologies for their specific vertical and function. It's a very fascinating thing to see Terence when we think about the arts, we think about entertainment. Is there a silver lining? Is there a sunny side to this when we look at this convergence of AI in the metaverse, if you will, from your lens? And what is it that you would like to see done on a humane level, per what you expressed just a bit ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to quote Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, life finds a way, you know. I think humans want to connect. Humans, this is like going back to the misinformation and everything. You brought up such an astute point. Like oftentimes individuals want to connect with each other. So they'll use whatever kind of tools they have at their disposal. And sometimes that's misinformation to be like, hey, did you hear? I heard this. And they'll pass it along. I maybe this is hopefully not, you know, Pollyanna, but like I really believe that humans inherently want to just be and be seen, right? They want to just be validated for their existence and connect with each other. And I also think that that's why everyone is so obsessed with becoming immersed, and why immersive technology, all of it is just another way to say, be in the moment with this right now. Just be present with this. It's all around you. Use all your senses. And I speak to, when I tell people, I try to remind them that they need to realize that ultimately they're the ones making the experience immersive. You know, they're the ones stepping in. It's their senses. It's their experience of the world, and it's easy. With the more tech you throw on top of it, you remove all the tech. I love technology. I feel like I'm the Luddite of the group here, but like it's I do love technology, but you know, we're living this fascinating existence, each of us, um just seeing from inside our heads, you know, processing with our senses. It's so easy to forget this stuff because we just go through our lives and thinking that, you know, everything needs to happen outside of us. It's new agey, but I mean, this is what kind of comes up. This is what this technology, all these advancements just are reinforcing. I mean, the act of putting on a VR headset gives you that, um, you know, that dichotomy of just, okay, you are here and then you are entering a new world. And then when you exit it, where are you? Are you outside the world? Like, when does it end? And, you know, all these talks of people looking into if this is a simulation, all that stuff's kind of disappeared because AI is more interesting right now. So yeah, to answer your question, I think there's a lot of hope. You know, I bet people are terrified in the industrial age. You know, but like Dr. Ed brought up, it's really we're going to be able to get a lot more done. I think it's also it's funny how emotionally um, us as humans process this. I mean, we're processing so much. There was a global pandemic that we're still traumatized and trying to pretend like everything's back to normal, but like we haven't dealt with that personally as humans fully yet. And so right now there's more fear. And so perhaps a lot of people who aren't in the tech space are looking at this with fearful eyes because of what they just went through just a few years ago, and thinking, oh no, what's this apocalyptic thing? And again, apocalypse, what is it? Lifting of the veil, revealing the truth. So ultimately, all of this is a positive thing. It's just we need to approach it with kindness and with each other, first and foremost. And hopefully, the advent of artificial intelligence will help each of us be reminded of our own humanity when encountering each other as humans.
Thank you for sharing that, Terence.
Thanks, Chris.
Your expression on that is very heartfelt. You're certainly not the Luddite of the group. You'd be surprised at how many people in the GatherVerse community aren't technologists.
I love you all.
And so certainly always feel free to come as you are, and we welcome all, whether they have anything to do with the technology vertical or not. And David, on that note, we talk about community. horizontally. We talk about people coming from different places around the world, just like we are right now with all the folks that are sitting here with us on GatherVerse.live and some of the folks that are on YouTube and other different places that we stream to. We think about community, we think about centralization and expression and share. Why has community become so important and such a focal point for the work that you're engaged in right now and that you're doing? And what do you perceive as the inherent value of this expansion of more communities that are coming about, like Amany talked about, in different virtual worlds?
Community is very important in my work because I aim to catalyze, at least be one of the catalysts for what we're calling the regenescence. The regenescence is this notion that we will move towards a more regenerative world. And that's not going to happen with us working one person at a time, just changing our individual behaviors. It's going to happen with us coming together, putting our minds together, creating community that's focused, that's purpose aligned to get big things done. I mean, the level of change that's needed to regenerate the planet, to regenerate ourselves, it's immense. And so we find ourselves in a place where we need to understand how to make our communities more intelligent. When I think about humanity as a collective, I often like to think about it in the trajectory of a human lifetime. And there's an argument for saying that humanity is like a teenager because our prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, so we make a lot of somewhat unintelligent or dumb, reckless decisions, and because of that, we're not living on the world, living in the world sustainably, and what that suggests, if we want to embrace that metaphor and kind of mine it for interventions and other things, we could say, well, if in most traditional societies, they always had an initiatory process that allowed them to transition from being a teenager to an adult. And this transitionary process, it could look however it wants to be. I mean, they often had things called rites of passage, but who's to say that what we're going through right now is not the rites of passage or the initiatory ceremony for humanity to move from this teenager embodiment to more of a fully functioning adult that allows us to live on the planet sustainably. So I'm wondering, I'm curious to understand if our new technologies, the metaverse, the AI, that all these things that are emergent now can help us build these purpose aligned communities that can move us in the right direction, that can help us become more collectively intelligent. I often think about us, humanity. Well, how collectively intelligent are we compared to what we could be? Are we a 5? Are we a 7, or are we more like a 2? I mean, I know we're very individually intelligent. We can get very individually intelligent, but what about collectively? I mean, to what extent are we tapping in the potential for humanity to be collectively intelligent? I think we're very, very low on the scale. I think the metaverse, the metaweb, AI is going to have to be foundational for us to be able to begin thinking, learning, and building knowledge together at scale, asynchronously, and in real time.
Thank you for sharing that, David. I will take that analogy for a second and look at it, Dr. Ed, and haven't we been very childlike with this planet and the upkeep of it? Have we not learned some responsibility on how to take better care of our environments? We are learning, the concept of recycle, is only some decades in. It's not like we've been doing it through the ages and dispensations of time. I don't think they had recycle bins in the 1800s, early 1900s. Said, oh yeah, just put that over there. We're as plastic. I know that how remedial this may sound, this discussion itself. Plastic, a plastic bottle, that wasn't something of a thing that we've been dealing with for hundreds and even thousands of years. But we said, okay, we made this, we innovated this thing called a plastic bottle. Now what do we do with it? And should we have it in the first place? So we're learning, and might we consider how infinitesimal we are as a collective human society when it comes to much more of what we interacted with here. And now we're saying we want to extend this reality. And we're building tools that I don't think we've considered the magnitude that we understand what we've actually innovated. And this is why we have Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, saying, hey, we're going to need help from law enforcement. This is why you have Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, saying we need the help of the United States government and Congress, because there's things that we're building and we don't completely know the magnitude of how they'll affect the world and society. I adopt the hat and having them acknowledge it, but we still haven't innovated it. We still have put it out there regardless. And so now that ship has sailed. And so when might we mature to a matriculation point to where we think more sustainability and human considerations? And Dr. Ed, as those that deal with our young people, what are we about to pass down to them? We know what we've inherited, I think, but what are we about to pass down into this generation? And do you feel good about the prospects of what we're handing down to them when it comes to these present innovations, sir?
Well, thank you for the question, Chris. And I do think for the next generation, I'm always an optimist, but I do feel like at the same time, we also need to be activists because, well, my father experienced racism, I experienced racism today, and I know that if I don't do anything, that's going to be passed on to my children. And so before I was talking a little bit about this story of like the evil robot and how you train them that way. And I ask often students, like grade 3 students, so whose job is it to identify, and whose job is it to figure out what is right and what is wrong? And I keep going back to, that is your job. That is your job as a citizen on this internet. You need to make that decision. The computer is not going to make that decision for you, and it will never be able to make that decision for you. Like ethics and those kind of things are like a human experience that isn't something that we capture in an AI system. And the thing that I would emphasize here is you were talking a little bit about change and environment and policies, and that reminds me of politics. And I just went through here in Alberta a recent election. And one of the things that was the key messages from this election is that it is not good enough for us to just reside within our own echo chambers. Twitter is an echo chamber, right? Like if you're on there, LinkedIn is its own echo chamber. And those people who would go on Twitter, on LinkedIn, may not be the ones that you really need to talk to. And the problem the problem isn't the ability to connect. There's a financial interest in keeping people in those echo chambers, specifically the ones that are very focused on the low level thinking. We talk about like the two different trains of thought. We have the high level thinking and then the low level thinking, or we call it like fast thinking or slow thinking. And so really we want for these companies to keep your attention, they really have to focus on the low level, something that triggers emotion and doesn't get you to think too hard about any particular topic. And what this does is it leads into this strong hatred of other people. So you start retweeting and posting, and you're kind of in this echo chamber. And anybody who is outside of it gets kicked out. And there are many different communities, but I focus specifically on the Mandarin-speaking community. And the reason I did was because they don't use the same social media that I might use. Like they don't use Twitter, they don't use Facebook, they don't use LinkedIn, they use WeChat. And in that environment, people were able to spread misinformation just constantly, like then write articles that are not false. And so it took us a long time. Like the moment we would post something that was like, hey, that's not true, we would get kicked out. And so we spent a lot of effort in these environments to create multiple accounts so we could like infiltrate these accounts. So if one person got kicked out, another person could come back in and continue to post. And I think that it follows the Tim Urban's, he wrote a book, the What's Our Problem book. We need to, when we think about politics and we think about policies, we have to understand that this is always the low-level thinking, because it was an evolutionary thing that we needed in order to survive. It's like, yes, I have to hate those other people in the other tribe, because if I don't, they'll come in, they'll attack us, and we'll be dead. And so our politics has always been focused on low-level thinking, and it is very difficult to get out of that mode. That is the kind of the mode that the metaverse and AI is pushing us towards, is more and more low-level thinking, because that's very good for these companies. And so it kind of allows us to isolate ourselves, but then there's also that the collective outrage that we describe sometimes as like the cancel culture or like the woke mob. The way that it's described is basically a lot of outrage can really impact a person. So in some ways it's good. It means that like the community can get together and then they can force some kind of change just through this kind of public shaming of an organization. But at the same time, if all of the data isn't based on facts and it's just based on like collective outrage, then we're going to make mistakes. And sometimes people will be judged before all the facts have come out. And so to move away from this tribalism, there is kind of a need to focus a lot more on the critical thinking aspect. And this is the thing I often say for young students is that's what you need to focus on. The reason I say like, hey, the AI, do 10 times as much means that you spend way less time on generation, like generating the text from nothing. Don't worry about that. I'm more interested in, do you know what good text looks like? Do you know what a good picture looks like? Do you know what a good behavior on the social media platform looks like? Sure. And can you judge that differently from the ones that are bad or not good or harmful? Sure. I think that this is the critical skill that is so important. Like we focus on these basics of like writing and reading, and I feel like it's wasted, really, or maybe we even focus on coding. But they don't often tell you, hey, focus on like learning AI and learning how these, like what is important in these AI systems, because that would give you a lot of power and that could allow you to resist what they're trying to push upon you. Sure. But it is really this critical thinking that is going to give us the type of collective movement towards the better future. Like the one that cares about the environment, the one that cares about like the minorities, or the ones that care about those who are most marginalized by AI systems, including like the kind of digital colonialism that is happening right now with the training of your data and the marking of data systems and the human detection of harm. These are all types of exploitation that is happening today.
Indeed, it is. Audience, Amany, Dr. Ed, David, Javier, Terence, follow them, embrace them. They're our community, they're your community. We only do this together, or we don't do it at all. Thank you so much, Pamela, for joining us. Our gather has been well. Thank you for joining us once again. We had an incredible panel just now on the expression and the exploration of virtual cities. What does that look like when we start talking about, yes, virtual cities, that you can one day relate to a city virtually as common as you would Paris, Austin, San Francisco, New York, that you would one day refer to a virtual community that has the populace of a natural, real city, as we must consider that we are extending reality. I'm bringing Devin Baldwin up with us now to have a brief discussion on what does it look like at the intersection of the metaverse, AI, and STEM. Devin, your mic, sir. We welcome you. We greet you.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Thank you, GatherVerse community, for having me as well. I'm glad
We're
to be here.
really happy to have you here. Devin, let's lead into it. When we start talking about STEM technology, with the few minutes that we have to be able to expand, why is this critically important, especially under the banner of education, which certainly has a place in my heart, and I know it has a place in yours, and many of our audience that are with us today, educators and professors and teachers and parents and mentors. When we talk about the power of STEM at this very frail intersection of XR and the metaverse, what does that look like to you, and why should we be concerned?
Well, for me personally, let me just give a little context. I am an educator. I teach WebXR development to middle school and high school children and some adults, but mainly I work with kids, mainly the youth of the Bay Area, the Oakland area, mainly underserved communities, Black and brown children. And very early on within that realm, you see that there's a lack of access. And we have to realize where our education system is now, which they recently closed down a number of schools in Oakland due to there's teacher strikes, there's many things happening education wise to where the teachers don't feel supported enough to teach these students. So the education system has failed them. Where STEM comes in is it is now something to where it's tangible. Well, the way I first got introduced to working with kids in STEM is I went through a nonprofit called STEM Tank, and I taught kids how to do basically digital fabrication using the laser cutter, 3D printer, and different things like that. And the thing that really sparked the light in my head was when I was like, okay, these kids are actually very intrigued with the tangible aspect of tech, seeing something that, they can touch, they can, design, taking it from an idea on the computer, sending it over to the printer, sending it to the laser cutter, and having a physical something they can touch. It's very transformative. And from the perspective I have within my classroom, I take a different approach. I want the kids to understand, like, hey, this is something that you need to understand, and I'm going to make sure that you understand it. I'm going to take as much time as it takes to get you to understand it. We have a set, course, but I'm very patient and I'm there for my kids. I listen. It's a very important thing with kids because kids ultimately just want to be heard. When they're heard, they're able to they're able to kind of relax and comprehend and take in things.
Do you have a concern, Devin, when it comes to these emerging technologies such as AI in particular, when it comes to the lack of availability for especially our underserved communities in places in cities like Oakland and Compton and elsewhere, that they're not getting enough information to understand what's coming their way?
Absolutely. Because more than likely they're not. And I'll be blatantly honest. Most of the time they don't care.
Sure.
Like they don't care. They only care about what's on social media. They only care about what's happening with celebrities and music artists. It's really, getting them to understand the importance of STEM and what it can make for you and what it can really give you. I do my best and I go into every class, every situation saying, it'd be amazing if I can reach them all. But if I can just reach one or two, if I can just reach one or two.
And you know what? That's so heartfelt and so precious, even with our time that's now spent together. I have to say that as a child that grew up in those streets of Oakland with the work that you're doing, I had a dad. I had a dad that was a technologist. My dad was a brilliant technologist. I've been in technology for a very long time. Weren't for him, I would not be sitting here with you today. The work that you're doing is some of the most heartfelt work that I've ever come across in life. Those who take the pilgrimage opportunity to spend some of their lives to reach to our underserved communities, no matter the color, no matter the background, that don't have access and that reach out to our children. I hope everyone gives you every opportunity that they have from their heart to help support you, Devin. Thank you for joining us today. Our gather was well, sir.
Thank you, my friend. Until next time.
It's time to have a discussion. I want to lean forward into science. I want to lean forward into molecular biology. And who better to do it with than a molecular biologist who has been working in this space for many years at this intersection of XR and AI. And as it was so appropriately expressed in the panel that we just had, that we haven't even completely wrapped our minds around the impact of COVID-19. Has this technology pacified us? Have we really passed by the opportunity to get right that was what we found ourselves exposed by the pandemic? We're going to talk about this and a little bit more at this intersection. First, I bring up Ippolito Caradonna, fellow technologist, brilliant scientist, and a very dear friend. Ippolito, we're happy to have you here with us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much, Chris. Great talk, great gather so far, very inspiring. Great to hear all the community gathering and contributing to such an important conversation.
Absolutely, indeed. And we must say congratulations on the extension of your family.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're happy to have you here. Amany, help me to be able to venture off. Let's take it to a different level when we talk about the nature of science and using these technologies. But I want to talk about it with the hard work that you're doing and developing in the prototype of AugLab. You've been working on this for many years and understanding the nature of when we think about the laboratory and what we also think about the intersection of these technologies that we're building today and have been building for years and how much more relevant have they become today. Can you bring us a bit into your world and what you've been looking at for some time now and why it's so important?
Yes, happy to. So as you mentioned, AugLab is an AR software interface for laboratory production. In short, I guess simplistically, you would say it helps scientists, any scientists, navigate any given laboratory space using a spatially projected interactive environment. And this technology actually was a brainchild in the incubator that we're both a part of called HoloPractice. Within that space, it was able to form, if you will, and really just be watered and nourished. And what it's become in light of the pandemic is something that's completely inseparable to our way of life. And so what I mean by that is, why wouldn't we, use all the emerging technologies that we can to tackle the next pandemic? Why wouldn't we harness all of the technology, all of the information, all of these breakthroughs that are happening right now to arm the frontline medical workers, the vaccine developers, and all of the medical and research community with the most cutting edge technology? And that's really the basis of OGLab in terms of equipping research scientists in the lab.
When we think about this, and this is so striking and so important, and have we learned this, the consideration that sometimes things don't matter until it becomes so prevalent to you and it starts knocking on your door and my door and our doors, if you will. And it seems to me now is the time that we start building for the next catastrophe or pandemic, this that is soon and certainly sure to arrive.
Right.
And when we think about our frontline workers who we care about, our servicemen and women, first responders, and globally, and the hard work that they do, we think about the residual fallout that's happened medically. And when we think about society and how disruptive the pandemic has been, which has been the greatest disruptor contemporary in our time, we talk about AI and metaverse disruption, but that pales in comparison to, and is rather finite compared to the disruption that the pandemic has brought to our shores when it comes to COVID-19. With the work that you're doing, when we start talking about OGLab and the use of headsets, Apple just came out with what I believe is a brilliant first introduction of 1.0 version of a headset where I had the capability to be able to film and capture in live my memories, if you will. And it seems that they're attempting to fit and fortify a volumetric system onto a headset, which is a very intriguing prospect. When we think about that in the lab, right, how much more important might it be when we think about AI and augmented reality when it comes to lab development and in the medical industry and for science?
It's so important, and I would love to bring it back to the front line and the men and women that are doing the hard work to prepare for the next pandemic. And that doesn't just that goes across many different spectrums, many verticals. That's the hospital workers, but that's also where I fit in, where is the laboratory scientists that are working diligently day and night. And so I would love to focus and steer your attention to the wellness of those individuals. See, because the vaccines and all of the developments are to actually preserve or to save human lives, it's important to understand the lives that are behind those products and the stress and the weight that's on those individuals. And why it's so important when we talk about sharing a volume of space, when we talk about sharing a laboratory process, why it's so important is what NASA recently calls cognitive load. Okay, so in their most recent technology discussion about AR and using this actually for astronauts in space, what they're talking about is reducing the cognitive load. And that's what I believe AR and AI can do for researchers, laboratory workers that are trying to transfer technology at a rate that is above anything we've ever experienced. We want to train scientists faster. We want to help them fail faster so that they can develop the next breakthrough faster. But we have to keep in mind that science is, in short, it's hard. Science is hard and errors are costly. And in this fast-paced, rapid R&D paradigm that we live in, we need something that can really flatten the curve, eliminate human error, and give our workers the sharpness that can really help them with the product that will float through that approval process. We have regulations, right? Rightfully so. We can't put anything out into market that isn't vetted, that isn't heavily scrutinized. Well, the volumetric, the spatial computing, the digital twins technology that AR allows us gives us a really clear and transparent view of what's happening in the lab. Yeah, so it's very, very important. It can really help us specifically and directly with the next development that can tackle and that can rise up to meet the occasion when the next pandemic hits.
Amany, our time is always short-lived together. I have one more final question for you. When we look at this intersection, this pairing of science, I have to ask, it seems to me that we've taken science, because technology is an applied science, we've taken science and from this very abstract state to make it more concretely understood by utilizing it as a tool to go back into the ecosystem of science to better understand science itself. Are you excited for the future, near future, for what AI is being a help to assist when it comes to the work that you do? Are you excited about the prospects of unlocking science and prospectively physics and things that we just do not know about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I was talking about the cognitive load, what that does is that it frees up, if we're worried so much about the mundane, and these are the menial tasks that are in the lab, that lessens the cognitive load for things that are important, the creativity, the openness of being able to discover something new. That's really the foundation of science, is to discover. And so what it does is it gives us more space and more room to grow into something that hasn't been unveiled yet. And so we don't know what we don't know. What we do in the lab is that we go there every single day. I wake up with a brand new excitement, fresh, because there could be something that has never ever been discovered. That's the beauty of science. That's what we were talking, what the previous conversation was about. That's how we can engage the youth and make them more interested in STEM. That's the draw. That's the node that will lead to a huge network, a phylogeny of discovery. And we want to be able to spark that. And we want to be able to assist and enhance and augment, if you will, the humans that are involved in that discovery process. So this is just the beginning. I'm absolutely excited about what technology can offer us in the lab and why it's so important today.
Ippolito, Caradonna, my dear friend, I really appreciate you sharing some time with us, gathering with us once again. I too agree that we've barely, really, truly scratched the surface, have we? And there's great opportunity ahead, and we do take great caution. Audience that gathers with us now, get to know Ippolito Caradonna. He is somebody that you have a joy being able to work with, as I most certainly have. Up next, we have our final roundtable discussion and panel. We're going to be touching on enhanced realities, the convergence of AI, and extending reality itself. We have a wealth of minds that are coming to arrive to greet with us very, very shortly here. Amany, our gatherer, was well.
Thank you, sir. Take care. God bless.
Greetings and welcome again to GatherVerse Summit Immersive Intelligence. We've arrived here to the final session. It all goes by so quick, doesn't it? Yet here we are. We're about to lean in on a discussion of enhanced realities, understanding the convergence of AI and extended reality, thematic of today's occasion. We're about to lean in and to go into an exploration where most events dare to, not because they haven't wanted to, because this is so cutting edge and so right at the very cusp of what we're seeing unfold and in a very extended way seeing come together. That these technologies abide within this eco-habitat have been growing. They've been extending their own selves from what we have formerly known them as, and they're pairing together. These are conversations that we must have because in the middle of all of this is that intersection of humanity. I'm calling forth our panelists today and with us that have come to arrive and to join us. Panelists, I'd ask that you unmute your mics while you're being formally introduced. To the right of me and next over, we have Major Namrata Dhasmana coming to us from South Asia, attorney of GatherVerse community, and Lynn Gitau of the same. Ganesh Raju, with founder CEO of Alkhayat.io, and Dr. Logan, who's a consultant, coach, and professor that's with us, and Alan Olson-Urtecho, who joined us recently at our WellVerse Summit. We're happy to have you back, coming from Studio Bahia. And Orakwe John, who's been really leaning forward and exploring the vestiges of AI and dealing with digital transformation. We need more of those that will help with the transition and transformation to be able to make sense of what's coming from the shores, if you will, from private and public sector. And Dr. Logan, when we talk about AI and we talk about the role that it's playing, and from your experience and from your lens, Dr. Logan, what is that looking at from this intersection of XR and AI? And when we talk about enhanced realities and this convergence therein, why is this such a concern and that you've arrived with us today to be able to express what you're seeing from your lens? Your mic, sir. Dr. Logan, are you with us? Dr. Logan might be having some technical difficulties, but let me run this and route this over. Ganesh, let's bring this up to you as far as what you're looking at. We talk about this convergence. We're talking about AI XR today. What is that looking like for your lens?
I think this is going to disrupt many industries. What I'm seeing is, we from Akshaya, we work with many industries, sports, we work on fashion, hospitality, healthcare, education, utilizing XR. So I'd like to give some examples how, the things that we have been trying to do and how we see the industry can be disrupted. For example, hospitality industry. Today, let's say if you want to go check out some exotic food, what you do is you go to Google and search up, okay, let's say I want South African peri-peri food. And all you get is the food restaurants nearby you. You just see the menu in text, plain text. Sometimes you see them in images. But what if, imagine, if you can bring that menu, the dish, in 3 dimensions, steaming hot food, real in front of you, and let's say if it is a Michelin star hotel or a restaurant, and the chef walks in as an avatar in front of you, and he tells what has gone into making of this. He's the creator. Okay, he has created the dish. He has his own storytelling. He is passionate of what he has done. So he can tell what has gone into the making of the food, right? So instead of just going to a restaurant and being served from a waiter, what if you get the experience of the chef coming to you and explaining to you what has gone into it? Not only that, let's say if you can track, if you can bring in AI and then integrate the dietary restrictions. Okay,
Sure.
if you can pop up what ingredients has gone in, what are the health benefits, right? So these are revolutionary in the hospitality industry, right? So similarly, education, right? Today, what we study in schools are textbook. What if we can make it an immersive experience through XR, right? Have the AI built in and utilize what is there in the textbook, and then give them in a much more immersive feel, right? So those are the educational
Sure.
industry, uh, manufacturing industry. So you are working, you are fixing something, and if you can bring in data about the instrument that you're fixing, real time, and even bring them, give them, provide the data into your XR goggle of where your process is. Let's say there is something delay in your process. You get to know what the delay is, before you get to work to it. If and whatever you're doing in real time, if you can see what is happening and predict, there are mistakes, right? And if we can give that information in front of you, so
Yeah.
that's manufacturing, right? So there are so many industries that can be disrupted.
There very are. And we think about extended reality where manufacturing's old hat right now when we think about XR, but in terms of being able to predict a scenario and to be able to essentially say that 4 eyes are better than 2 when you're equipping that HMD, not with just your own eyes, but with a set of AI eyes. This is a very interesting consideration, Lynn. We're heading over to you. When we talk about as AI and XR come together, and we're entering into a new era of reality and one that's extended and enhanced. How does this redefine our understanding of what's real?
Yes, so thank you so much for having me. I'm Harvey.
Lynn, you may want to turn up your microphone. We're having a difficult time hearing you. Here, we'll let you get settled with that. Major, we're going to route it over to you for a second. And I want to ask the same thing of you, Namrata. When we talk about one that's extended reality, when we think about the enhancement of extending our own reality, when we think about extending our own reality, how does this redefine our understanding of what's real? And why should we even consider this?
That's an interesting question, and I was, having an interaction while consulting, taking all the kind of things which are actually happening in extended, reality. So, what is first extended reality? It is a blend. It's a mix of all, be it AI, VR, or ML. So, first and foremost, I would say, coming to your question, whether it's real or not, my perspective is it's still evolving. Extended reality is going to be the next future where we see the blend of AR, VR, and the machine language, because the algorithm that we are going to use to create that kind of extended reality is will still take time for us to understand whether it's going to be real or not. Secondly, when we talk about AI, or we generally expect things to get predicted, because till the time we don't have the prediction that what is I would, if I'm using an AI, or if I'm going to some place where I expect that I'm, my efforts get optimized, I would expect that some kind of prediction comes to me beforehand so that my time is, saved. So like in airports, the announcement of changing queues has started initiating. So if a queue is like there are 10 passengers standing in the queue, there will be a constant announcement that okay, queue number so and so is expected to have maybe 4 passengers or 3 passengers. So then there'll be a light, there's a green light, there's a red light, and there's a violet light. That's a kind of prediction which is happening. They also have a consideration that how much time one passenger is taking from changing from one queue to another queue. So this is what somewhat we can still say that it's real. But talking about extended reality, where we have a blend of all these technologies, is still will still take time, because the major and the fundamental challenge which I see is the data. If we don't get the correct data, we really cannot, predict. We really cannot expect that reality that we are expecting.
Sure. And when we talk about data, it's very interesting. It's not just typed information. We're also talking about biometrical data. We're talking about human data. It's very interesting what's going to happen when we even start to reimagine and rethink and extend the considerations on how we look at data as it anthropomorphizes in some different types of ways where some may not appreciate that reality. Orakwe, I'm bringing it over to you and asking a very important question. How can AI empower XR to tackle the reality gap, meaning the disparity between digital and physical interactions? When we look at this very thin layer, the more pressing that we come forward, and somebody made mention of it earlier, that AI serves as a benefit for the metaverse and making it more authentic, making it more real when we start thinking about that. And what ways are we looking at when we look at the power of AI to make our extended reality more real towards the reality that we're already familiar with? Your mic, Orakwe.
Okay. All right. So again, if I get the question correctly, it's how can AI be used? How can AI be used to extend reality or make it a lot more realer? Is that it?
That's it.
Great. So I think that, I mean, reality varies for different people. Okay. So for somebody who has low vision or blindness, their reality is very different from my reality. I was exploring a case study of how GPT-4 is being used by the people at Be My Eyes, right? And what they're using it for is, so people with low vision and blindness, what they simply do is instead of human volunteers, right, who are not always available to the blind people or people with low vision, they can use GPT-4 with vision, not the regular GPT-4 we have access to now, but the one with vision, so that it could be midnight, it could, at any time of day, the person who is using this GPT-4, which is an AI with vision, okay, can use this to prepare a meal in their house and identify whatever they need to make their food. Okay, so I think when it comes to making reality real, I will speak to it from the angle of there are people who do not have all of the privilege that we have of good eyesight and all the interesting things. And I think that for lots of people who need help in the accessibility community, or who need help in some kind of way, AI and the blend of extended reality, especially with Vision Pro, because I also explored another thought experiment today where Apple's Vision Pro and combining Apple's Vision Pro with Google's Google Maps Special View, okay, with the surround sound that Vision Pro is able to afford the user, you can actually build a solution that helps people, blind people, to explore reality better. So to that question, I would say reality is different for all of us, and for those who do not express reality the usual way, extended reality and AI is their way of understanding reality better.
I find it so powerful, your answer, and it's really appropriate when we think about how reality is different from everyone else. And it seems to me that in some ways we might benefit to stand a chance of welcoming and embracing AI to be able to simply sort out the different realities that exist for others, and to be able to make this technology more accessible for those. For so long, this technology and these technologies have not been accessible before. And Alan, I'm bringing it over to you because I know that as someone that is really well traveled in this world and has worked with a number of communities, more than I care to count, and we talk about this line of accessibility and democratization and getting to communities even simple broadband and Wi-Fi and web browsing. What does this look like when we talk about how this will shape our future? And is accessibility still a concern to the communities that seem so far to reach? Are you seeing a way for AI deployment to be able to help close the gap? And there's no wrong or right answer at the moment. And your mic, sir.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful to be with all of you. And great question. Yes, accessibility, it's still a concern in many places, but at the same time, there are communities who thrive and have been successful for thousands of years without it. And so at the same time, access is a question of whether that community will benefit from it in a good way. If you look at international development, I worked at the World Bank out of college, and I grew up in Central America. And so in Central America, this group of people, Americans, came down and said, we're going to give electricity to all these towns and villages. And so they put up this windmill, was able to provide electricity, but it disrupted this community in a way that the lighting at night led to drinking and men staying up late and television, and disrupted the cohesion of this community, the Mosquito community in Nicaragua, Honduras, significantly. The social fabric of that community broke apart. It led to all sorts of other issues. So yeah, accessibility, I wouldn't rush too much to, it's two sides to it, obviously. Sure. This community obviously was completely disintegrated after thousands of years of being together because of electricity. So yeah, there is two sides to it. We work with communities in refugee camps, and so what we try to do is bring out the solutions from within that community. We do indigenous psychology, so we do workshops in which the community addresses a concern within that community using virtual reality. And so they design it, the aesthetics of it is their own, their solutions are their own. And so yeah, on that side, there is a bottom-up approach in which the community, through mobile phones, these communities are already quite connected, and AI is becoming accessible through mobile phones. And we look at countries like, we're doing a project in Iraq. And so Iraq is 40 million people. There's 38 million mobile phones. So some communities have a great degree of access. And I think the Chinese are installing 5G. And so it's quite accessible in some places. In other areas, I would really question the idea of whether they need it at times, because some communities can be quite disrupted. And so, yeah, it's two sides to that answer.
I think it is a very fascinating answer of what you rendered out. On the other side of it, at least from my lens, the reason I see the expressibility to have access is to contribute and to help define this globally distributed technology that's being developed for all and for humankind. And I think we serve at a great disadvantage for having deployable technology of this magnitude and power only defined by a small fringe few. And that brings me to you, Lynn. When we think about Africa, and audience, how do you feel about who gets the say on what this technology is? And should it be globally accessible for the input and the contribution of humankind itself? Because the decisions that are being made now in the laboratories and innovation halls and hacker spaces are impacting the world globally. And it seems to me the globe should have the opportunity to define it. And that brings me over to the great continent of Africa. Lynn, when we think about Africa, where you hail from, has Africa become more acclimated to these emerging technologies? And we know that Africa dives real deep into Web3 and to blockchain technologies and others. But when you look at this marriage pairing of all of these different really ascending emerging technologies, what does that look like for you when we begin to talk about having the shape of these technologies become less abstract, more concrete, and more applicable to our daily lives? Is this becoming a value add, number one, for the African continent? And two, has Africa been able to access more so than other continents that you're seeing in this world adopt these technologies?
Thank you so much. I hope I'm now audible. It's raining cats and dogs. My background is a little bit noisy, but excuse me for that. So on regards to Africa, we have always been left behind when it comes to emerging technology and industrial revolution. revolution. And we have seen the fourth industrial revolution, it's ours, the BTC. We believe so. Plus, we have a very young, vibrant generation that is so hungry and so willing to learn about all these things. So the issue with us here is when you guys, maybe from the West, are developing these things, do you have us in mind? And if you don't have us in mind, what can we do for ourselves? Because the way we innovate for us is for solving our own problems. We are one whole big world, but we have different problems. So Africa has its own problems, and we're looking at AI and XR as a different lens from what or how you're looking at it. So for us, when it comes to XR or maybe AI, it's about scaling, it's about doing quick in a very fast way so that we can create more industry, so that we can manufacture more, so that our kids can get educated easily without even having to study. So the way we look at it and the way we look at XR, AI, emerging technologies, it can solve our own problems. If it can, we ain't going to adopt it. For you, maybe XR is about entertainment, but for us, XR is about preserving our culture. It's about experiencing another level of education that you guys have. So the user cases are different. And when it comes to developing all these technologies, if you're going to develop for the African market, you have to pay attention to the problems that you're trying to solve. I think that's my take. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Lynn. We really appreciate your expressions all the way from the great continent of Africa itself. And Dr. Logan, we're happy to have you back, and hopefully you're able to hear us. We're getting ready to delve into the expressions of the extending of this reality and what that means for education as we know it today. And we know through the decades, we in the educational field are always attempting to find unique ways to be able to teach our cohort of students. And there are new technologies that arrive annually, monthly now, weekly, if you will, almost daily, that somewhat bring the promise to afford us the opportunity to take a set of information and to teach so many minds. When it comes to education and what we see with these very cutting edge technologies, how are you using this towards your advantage? And do you see an advantage where we're at with this very fast accelerating pace of technology that we're at today, sir?
I do, and thank you all. I apologize for my internet issues that I was having, but so yeah, I do. I was actually listening to you all as you all were speaking on another unit. This right here is an opportunity that I'm speaking with the universities I'm affiliated with as to this isn't coming, it is here. And if we don't make a move to get involved, as all of you all know, that Apple just had their developer conference. These are the things and the technological advances that are going to support the students, and not just what they learn, but the work that they do tomorrow. When they walk across that stage, what they'll be able to do, the training and whether we're talking first responders in any capacity or medical field, whatever it is, being able to be immersed in that is a game changer for what's to come in life, even as we're living longer and our seniors need care. How do we certify these individuals and recertify them based on the grounds of the requirements of these organizations? So yes, I am this is what I'm suggesting, pushing, proposing, and any other word that I can utilize to let them know this investment is going to pay off. It's paying off right now. And I'll say this and I'll stop. The very interesting thing is this. My statement is, we don't know how many of our students are gamers already that have the equipment. And so the fact that you have it, how are you going to use it? We can look at Uber and Lyft. A lot of individuals drove four-door vehicles. What Uber and Lyft did is gave them an opportunity to utilize what they had. This is what I believe we can do with education right now.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Logan. We certainly value your expressions, and we're happy you're able to rejoin with us. Ganesh, I'm bringing it back over to you. You gave a plethora of different use cases of what we might see and how we can see this convergence of AI influencing the metaverse, if you will, and what we're already seeing practical applications being applied within industry and in a manifold number of industries. But let's go to the moral compass for the second, and let's consider humanity in this next question. Is this good for us? Is this something we need? And I think Alan brings up a great point. Is this something that every community will want? Should they need? Do they need it? They've been evolving and operating without certain technologies for a good long time. But Kevin actually makes the point, Dr. Logan makes the point about this is something that we should move on, and first movers. And typically what we come to find is that first movers stand to benefit the most and gain the most when it comes to moving on these technologies that are being released and consumed, whether for general consumption, public and private sector. Where do you stand when we think about, does what we're seeing stand to benefit humanity? And in what variable of humanity does it stand to benefit the most from what you're looking at?
Okay, so I'm very, very optimistic about this technology. I agree with Dr. Logan as well, that this is going to disrupt many industries and provide new opportunities, and it will speed up the adoption to technologies. I think, there are issues in terms of how the privacy will be handled. Right. So when we try to bring in AI, obviously we are, like Major Namrata pointed out, it is all about data. So you got to have the data, and if the data is private data, and the AI is trained by that, again there is issues of privacy and everything. Those are things that we need to keep. Okay, where do we draw the line? Which is private data, and how do we train the AI when especially we try to pull together your preferences, your dietary restrictions, like I had mentioned, right? Your pattern of where you go visit, what you do, what you consume, right? What are you looking at? Okay, what are you watching? All this data, if you try to collect, and obviously how that data is going to be used is a concern. But in a bigger picture, I'm very, very optimistic of the value add that it can bring in, and how it is going to help the humanity in general by providing, like, the people who are disabled, for them the opportunities, and people who cannot communicate, maybe people who don't understand the language. If you can translate that and help that through all that, is the opportunities that it can bring in. That's what I look and positive.
Thank you, Ganesh, and I appreciate that. Lynn, we're headed back over to you. Let's talk about a moment, just real quick and real brief. What are the benefits for greater accessibility to these emerging technologies, say within the continent and elsewhere? Why do we want these? For what gain of society and for the overall benefit of humanity?
As I said earlier, it's about scaling. For us, we want to really do so many things within a short period of time, because we realize the world is moving fast, we've always been left behind. So how do we catch up? And that is where emerging technologies, AI, and all these things come together, and we're looking at them as a way of how do we make things better, right? How do we just be at par? We want to be at par with the world. We have realized that being left behind is maybe the worst scenario we want to happen. So on accessibility, it takes a lot of stakeholders, it takes a lot of government policies, because I feel that is also an issue when it comes to bringing in accessibility. And also it takes a lot of people like me, young people, to advocate. Our governments have always been slow. We have realized the time is going to them anymore. So we are looking forward to collaborate with the world. What does the European have? What does America have? What does China have? And how can we come as a collaborative, as a joint, to create a very good accessibility for this technology? And we have missed out on education. Our education is still broken. There are people who have no access to school. There are kids who still go to school under a tree, happily. And this kind of technology, if we can just create a room whereby our kids can now access the new and the latest technologies in XR and computers, then it will do us a very huge favor to leapfrog the whole process of building classes, creating another syllabus, and all that. So for us, it's all about leapfrogging and getting at par with the world. And accessibility is also a very big issue. It's a whole wide topic, but coming together and having these conversations and a lot of advocacy and lobbying, we will have a very meaningful kind of world where we interact together and everyone is equal to each other. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Lynn, and we really appreciate your expressions. And I really appreciate the organic nature of this conversation, and for natively for everyone hails. We know that broadband is a big deal, and it's hard to sometimes even tap into a Zoom conference, depending on where you're at. And I feel like we're, as we have become more virtual in the past 34 months than we have more so the past 34 years, this is a method and a way that we communicate with one another. And the reality is that while we say on one hand that GPT has arrived and we're in this AI revolution coming from the technological revolution, we really haven't really done, I think, a great job in connecting even the ones that say they're connected when it comes to these very seemingly finite technologies such as Zoom and Google Hangouts and other broadcast platforms. And I find it very interesting how lopsided it is. I know here in Silicon Valley, we're exceedingly advanced, and elsewhere, there's other different places throughout not only North America, but throughout the world that are advanced. In some areas, they're really having a difficult time keeping up. And we want to hear from everyone. But when Alan, I think about the ingress into environments, you certainly have gone into environments where few have traveled. And I think about the benefit for what we build. Is it just for digital gain of extension on a digital sense? Or are we missing an opportunity, do you believe, in terms of helping better reality? We think about the betterment of extended reality and using these technologies to extend it, but how do we take this extended reality to better this reality?
Yes, that's a great question. I work at Studio Bahia. It's a nonprofit. I work with 6 women with PhDs in virtual reality. I'm a PhD candidate. We design for the NHS, Stanford, Harvard, Mayo Clinic. So we do very high level, but because of AI and how it's come into the market and what it's projected to do, we took it upon ourselves to kind of really study what we want to do in the future. And so we looked at it, and the question you have to ask yourself is, what is virtual reality? Virtual reality is an embodied art form. Now, most virtual reality out there is pretty bad. But if you get good virtual reality with good cognitive spatial cognition, surround sound, spatial sound, it gives you a great sense of presence. And that presence is embodied. And so we went looking for what is the most embodied form of art in the world. And what we found is something in medieval India called Kashmir Shaivism. And Kashmir Shaivism is where you get things like Kundalini and Tantra, different forms of yoga. So it's one of the most sophisticated systems of embodiment ever created. And specifically Kashmir Shaivism, which synthesizes thousands of years of Indian rituals and then releases it to India. It was very progressive. It allowed women to seek enlightenment. Any caste could do it. Probably why it was crushed, because it was maybe too progressive. But in itself, that practice is a pathway to embodied liberation. Now, us Westerners, we grew up in the United States and Europe. By extension, we have a lot of European philosophy, which divides the mind and the body, the Cartesian divide. We also divide the self from the object. part of our selfhood and how we conceive of the self is filled with divisions which allow all sorts of subjugation of other peoples, women, the objectivizing, the division of body and mind, as if our mind was just standing here and the rest of this is all dangling. But we're under that framework for 400 years. It's been good in some senses, but it's been very bad in other senses. And so that division, that binary form of thinking has been very negative. We in the United States and Europe, we only make up 11% of the world population. 90% of the world does not divide the body and the mind, does not divide the self and the object. So they see it in a more holistic approach to the world and the perception of reality. Excuse me. So we take this perspective from the Indians, who for thousands of years have refined this embodied form of liberation, as a design philosophy in virtual reality, to be able to create experiences that can have a holistic approach, that can have a wellness approach built into the design process. So we focus on the design itself and how we're going to do generative worlds. And to do that, we're exploring what would be a very sophisticated form of embodied liberation.
I think about the express interpretation of the perceptron of AI itself and how it looks at these very old art forms, the antiquity therein. I find that very fascinating. Moreover, when we talk about perceptual sciences, of these experiences within these full virtual environments of dealing with cognitive fidelity and the translation of understanding, especially when we're dealing with environmental fidelity, cognitive fidelity, contextual fidelity, and intentional, unintentional fidelity. All that matters when we start talking about our XR experiences. And I too agree, as someone that's been in more virtual environments than I personally care to count, a lot of the VR today is really bad. I think it's more of a prototypical form. It's not really great. It serves as the benefit of what could be enhanced and made better. And if I see an opportunity for AI to make the fidelity greater and the experience, then and if it can happen in more of an exceeding and accelerated fashion than what a whole team of people can do, then I'm going to be on the side of AI. And although I know that disrupts a lot of people when it comes to jobs and in the work environment, and I kind of tend to think that we need to start thinking now about we as innovators or non-innovators, but contributaries nonetheless to innovation. Might we start to consider and think now, Namrata, when it comes to us adopting these technologies and taking advantage of these technologies, start thinking about what's next for my job and career that may be disrupted. What is next for me in life that I can do and that it could contribute to the skills that I've acquired for this thing that now has been taken over? And in some ways, I believe that some can see the justified takeover because it may do a better job.
Sure. Future of work is actually a kind of topic of discussion in so many forums, and I mean, we all have accepted definitely AI and Industry 4.0 has already done a lot of disruptions. There's no denying the fact. In spite of having a lot of challenges, a lot of issues which we are still tackling with, it is going to come. It is going to evolve. It is going to be the next way forward. There's no doubt about it. But then, there's certain things where like I'll come to this point of skills as well. But then there since I'm coming from this defense industry, there are certain things which I have really seen when we talk about using drones. So even drones is again AI enabled. Now, recently only there was a news where the operator was killed by drone in US, and while being in a simulation testing, and the operator was standing. It was of course the mistake of the operator only. He was standing in the red area. It is a red area and the green area, and drone was moving, and while being in a simulated test, the operator got killed. So now when we are talking about the skills here, now a person who is already involved in that kind of work is having this kind of fatal casualty. So now coming back to your question, what kind of skills we really need to have to be adapted to this kind of technologies? I think first and foremost is the aptitude, the attitude, and the presence of mind. I think that's really important because, like Alan said very wonderfully, that when we are into meditation, it is again actually a virtual reality when we have that kind of alignment with our soul. I'll not dwell much into it. I am a yoga practitioner, but then where we are talking about this technology, it is moving, it is rapidly evolving, and there's no dearth of skills. But then I think the the utmost important thing is of when we talk about humanity and the soft skills is the presence of mind and the aptitude. That's the most important thing, where any of the hard skills that these people can come up with, but if they forget their own human intelligence, if I may say that, the flavor of human intelligence is missed, uh, then it is going to be a I mean, it's not going to come with that kind of expectations what we are really wanting.
It's very interesting consideration to hard skill and soft skill. When I think about that in concert with the acceleration of technology, being that the tempo and really the cadence has increased. I know that there's been schools by Xavier Niel, French billionaire, who's created School 42, and he had a way of being able to say, we're going to create a school. It's going to be free and accessible to all, Dr. Logan, these schools. And the idea is to make it 24/7 in operation. And you can attend this school and you're going to be leveled up by AI. And AI is going to be your teacher, and there's not going to be a physical teacher about. So these things have already happened. But once these students began to learn and educate themselves at a very rapid rate using AI at their own pace, if you will, a lot of them were siphoned off by companies and corporations, not just here in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. And they were really sought after for their talent that they had learned. But what happened over time is that these companies began to realize in some capacity that there was a high sense of churn and that these employees were leaving these environments, and it came back to a lack of soft skill development. And so when I think about, on one hand, Dr. Logan, we do need to create more educational platforms that can keep up with this technology, because in some ways, and not completely in its totality, that technology has become more advanced than the technologist. And we have to have a way to be able to disseminate this information apart from traditional educational methodologies of extension. But at the same time, we don't want to miss out on the importance of soft skill development and working in communities in like fashion together, if you will. We lose some of that operating virtually, but we hope to gain some of that once there's greater fidelity, as Alan was mentioning, within virtual environments for us to meet similar to how we meet now. What are your thoughts and considerations, Dr. Logan, on the necessity and need to be able to create more educational institutions and platforms and to integrate a quicker process so that we can deliver hopefully accurate information to our students?
Yeah, that's a reality that all of the schools I'm affiliated with kind of bring up every now and then. It's about, I love the hard skill and soft skill merger. And Chris, right now, a lot of students, whether they're doing an online, face-to-face, hybrid, virtual, whatever they want to term it, they're accessing their books and material that give them some type of artificial intelligence that's there that says, if you hit this, then okay, this is the next question you get. It's not succinct as it once was. And so that does give them an opportunity for that skill level, but then it becomes, what's the application? How do I apply this in real world with humans? And I believe that's the opportunity that we get here in utilizing, putting on a headset, or just meeting periodically to see how can I apply this? How does it come off? You know, to Alan's point, when we talk about the cultures that are there, how are we bringing this in, and how are you using it, and how can I invite it in, not forced upon me? And that's where that difference of those soft skills come into play. For me, it boils down to 3 words: the autonomy, the competence, and the relatedness. What are my choices that I get? Everyone comes, they're competent in something. We all have a competency. And so we can do it. And then how do we show others that we can do it? But more importantly, how does this relate to me from my background and to my foreground of where I'm going?
Right. Sure. And thank you for sharing that. And we have to understand on a very intimate level now, how do these very prevailing technologies, Ganesh, relate to us, and how we're using them, and how they're being applied, not for tomorrow, but quite literally today. And what does it stand to serve in terms of our own wellness when we're using this? You know, we work to sustain, we work to grow and to build and contribute more abundantly to society. But now that we're being more AI assistant, what does that mean for how we may apply our energy elsewhere and to contribute to our own selves and to humanity, now that we may find more time? Some, as Dr. Ed in our previous panel said, when we're using AI, we need to do 10x more work because we have 10x more input and output. And so he's a fan of increasing the work or maintaining it, since we're going fast, keep up with it. There are others that are saying, hey, my job and my time has been cut half, my work day, because now I can use AI. Now I have this spare time to possibly do what? It's a very fascinating consideration, the frailty of time. So Ganesh, when we're looking at these use cases that you expressed to us initially in this discussion, and we think about how they apply to us, in what ways might we take a sensible approach to what are the better steps for us towards adopting these technologies that are now coming firmly in our lives? And at what point must we consider, is this healthy for me today? Me using these technologies in this fashion, just because it's there, should I be taking advantage of it? And if so, what am I contributing to humanity with my residual time that I have available now? How does this look like, this future that we're heading into, once we begin this adoption, which we have?
Packed question for sure. Obviously, when computers came, people had the similar kind of a question, saying that, computers are going to take away the job, and what are you going to do? And most of the jobs will be gone. I think we are at the same time, kind of a time period now, this same kind of thing. But computer did not take away the jobs. In fact, we are working more now, right? So I think it is all about, when we start to implement this AI, we will start thinking about how to utilize them properly, right? You need to have the skills in terms of what is the right approach, right? And again, these are the things, it's unknown till now. It's pretty early. All of it, it's just basically from my thought, and just presenting it is, you got to have, thinking about what different algorithms you need to use. How do you apply this AI? That's how you need to, will be thinking of our enhancing our skills and things like that. Okay, how are we going to switch, or how, if we find free time, how are we going to be engaged? I don't know the answer for now, right? So we'll have to just wait and watch.
Sure. And the non-answer is actually a really great answer. You brought up a really good point about when we entered into what we now called the information age, for those of us that were around that may be able to remember in the 90s, where all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's this thing called the internet, there's this thing called the web, and we received a lot of information in transition from industrial age to the technology age, if you will, which subsequent the information age has been part of. And what ended up happening is that we had a thing called a bubble. And the bubble expanded and expanded and expanded, and boom, there was a thing at the late 90s, early 2000s, I'm sure all of us remember this, where it popped. And part of the lesson we learned is twofold. One, we can't run a technological age like an industrial age, where we brought in old habits and processes and methods of industrial age, and we brought these processes and methods into a technological age. It wasn't fitting. So we had to understand that while we're regenerating towards a new thing, we've had to degenerate towards these old things. That was number one. And I would say that number two is, in this process, when we think about the bubble and when we think about receiving information, what happens when a whole society, a world, if you will, receives information and access that we've never had before? Well, it's what's led us to really the applications renaissance. Now that you have this information, you begin to apply, right? And so, Alan, I think about applying what we've learned and what we've intake. And so we've gone through this renaissance phase, and as a consequence, today, this is what's been delivered for the things that have been applied during the applications renaissance. We now get generative pre-trained transformers. We now get this thing called the metaverse, which was just, in Neil Stevens' fictional terminology. We get these things, and now that they're here, what do we do with them? And I would say this as a lead-in for you is, might it be best for us now to start having these dialogues and conversations today? Because I don't think we were having these conversations in the 90s. I don't even know if we knew to have these conversations in the 90s that led subsequently to the bubble. And it seems to me that it's so important to have these discussions now, the things that aren't asked. And so I really had appreciated Ganesh's non-remark and not having to answer this very vulnerable disposition that I think is a very honest place to begin with, Alan. And so,
yes, I don't know where we're going to be in 10 years. It is going to be a volatile decade.
Yeah.
If you can look at the last Great Recession in 2008, 60% of jobs were lost due to automation. It wasn't because of the financial sector or the collapse of housing. It was 60% automation. In 2008, we did not have AI. We're going into a recession now where we have AI and a lot of machine learning, and I would not be surprised if it's 60% due to AI job loss. So it's going to be volatile. It's going to be, and I think the best thing we can do in our team's sense is to be anti-fragile, be maneuver flexible, adapt, look for revenue models in a way that's unique. We're just a nonprofit, small nonprofit, but be loose and flexible and open to new ways of thinking. And as you said, your example was perfect. Is we continue to take up these old frameworks that barely worked in the past, and so we have to be open to new frameworks and creating a new and not fighting old systems, but replacing systems with better systems. And so I'm optimistic. I have no choice. I have to be optimistic. What else am I going to do? But I think there's a lot of promise in how we apply generative worlds to reflect how and what this world could look like, to create models of sustainable agriculture, sustainable development. And so I think modeling great behavior through systems that are vetted through a lot of good AI and scientists can kind of give us greater insight. And we learn more through being active and enabling. And I'll give you one last example very quickly.
Sure.
Virtual reality. Every hospital's got this little VR training for CPR. It's very sophisticated. It's got little dummies and stuff. And it doesn't work very well. Nobody remembers it, the training for CPR. But if you put them inside a VR experience where they're walking down a park and somebody yells, "Help!" and they go and they turn around and they go run and they ghost how you do the CPR, they'll remember that a year later, 5 years later. And the best training in a hospital for our healthcare people, for first responders, they forget it a month later. So being in it, being inactive, offers great learning potential, and I think it's going to make us much better. And there's going to be, but still very volatile decade, in my opinion. So thank you for that question.
And I want to say thank you all for your time as it's come now to an end. This whole summit, this 2 days of expressions. We certainly want to extend an invitation for you to join us again at future and very soon to be announced events that we're going to have. This has been a very insightful and engaging discussion and dialogue. And we all got to spend an hour together, audience. And I ask that you take time to remember who's with you today with Major Namrata and Lynn, Gitau, and Dr. Logan and Ganesh, Raju, and Olson-Urtecho of Studio Bahia. Remember who is with you today and spend some time with them apart from this. We only get a little bit of time to be able to do these things. And so, panel, thank you for the time that you've given. It's been valuable. It's been insightful. And our gather has certainly been well.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And audience, this brings us to a conclusion. We've had yet another gather. For those that have been able to stay with us, which is such a good chunk of you here at GatherVerse.live, and we have even a few of you residually hanging out with us in YouTube, and I'm certainly sure on other social platforms and broadcasts. I say this in closing that every moment is precious. We only get a little bit of time to do this. With the GatherVerse community, we're only able to do this in part because we're heart-powered. We're not financially powered, not in that regard. We give what we can. We do what we can. We do our level best. Why? Because we care, and we've been afforded the opportunity to express that in this way. In other ways, you find ways to express how you care, but you've taken time to be able to share with us your time, a thing that you'll never get back again. The time that you've had and that you spent with us today, you'll never get that back again. And we at GatherVerse are grateful for the opportunity, the investment of your time, and for us to be able to exchange it one another. We hope that you would share these experiences of what you've learned, but moreover, we hope that you would apply this in your daily lives, in your daily work. We certainly do give a vote of confidence and a nod and hope for the very best from friends at Meta or Apple and other different platforms that are out there contributing to these technologies, whether you're OpenAI or Microsoft. At the end of the day, we know you're corporations, but they're also humans. We want you to do the best. We want to inspire you to do the very best. You may not even see us, but we see you. We're here, gathering Earth's communities, bringing them into the metaverse and immersive technologies safely and humanely. Until then, until again, when we find another opportunity to gather, and when we do, may our gather be well. Thank you. Take care. Peace.